Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are going to see what if Sakura proposed Naruto after war part 1. Hope you will enjoy this video, so before we start please like the video and subscribe to our channel and hit bell notification, it motivates me to upload more fanfics for my lovely audience. So let's get started. Oh, hell, Yamanaka Ino muttered, and Haruno Sakura quirked her eyebrows up, causing the blonde to look ruffled as she caught the pink-haired medic Nin's amused glance. Is that just a general remark about the restaurant, or was there something particular that you had in mind? Sakura queried innocently. For a second Ino looked a little exasperated with her, eyes flashing as she glared at the beautiful but mocking face of the 22-years-old nationwide famous medic Nin. The years had brought many changes in Haruno Sakura, resulting in the now poised, beautiful, sleek-figured, though war-waned young woman. She had regrown her hair slightly past her shoulders, which was currently tied in her usual low-napped ponytail from which some tantalizing bangs escaped. The jade-green eyes held a discreet glow of confidence which her spectacular growth had elided, and the most noticeable change on her face was the green diamond-shaped chakra point on her forehead, proof of one of her many outstanding achievements of the past years. It has been after a while that the two friends had managed to meet for lunch, and for that day, they had decided to try the new food outlet which boasted to have the best tempura in town. Sakura held her friend's eyes, her amusement growing, and Ino suddenly gave an impatient sigh, her tight expression relaxing. You can laugh all you want, forehead, but our conversation is not over yet. Are you going to explain the sudden oath, or do I have to look around the room and guess? Sakura asked wryly, at the same time inwardly grimacing at the warning. Ino had been right in the middle of giving her the "you should find a boyfriend" lecture which Sakura should not have been too surprised by, seeing that the last couple of times that the two friends had managed to meet for lunch Ino had insistently brought the subject up, but which still did not cease to exasperate her. It seemed that her love life, rather, the lack of it, was the hottest topic of conversation whenever the two of them met now. Lowering her head and bending closer, Ino whispered, I've just spotted someone that I could very well do without seeing. It's this Junin who've been asking me out constantly the past couple of weeks. He doesn't seem to understand the word no. Quote. Sakura raised her eyebrows in surprise. Ino having trouble to lay someone off. The Yamanaka girl was known to be blunt to the point of harshness when needed, so how come she could not keep an undesirable admirer at bay? Sakura curbed the reflex to look around, her curiosity piqued on what sort of man it could be. I'll just pretend not to have seen him, Ino whispered. Hopefully he'll get the message and not come over. Have you told him you're already engaged? Sakura asked, intrigued. She found it rather hard to believe that the man would still pursue an engaged girl. And Ino Yamanaka was a very much engaged gal. Since 2 months now. Maybe I haven't, yet, Ino shrugged vaguely. Seeing Sakura's eye roll, she said defensively, I haven't got the opportunity yet. It's still all so recent. Ino's 2-year story with Choji had finally been concluded by an engagement, with the wedding planned at the end of the year. Sakura was very happy for her friend. She and Choji were so much in love with each other, and it was clear on how much Choji doted on her. It seemed that her engagement had not stopped her from flirting around, though, Sakura thought ruefully. I'm sure he'll back off when he'll learn that you're engaged, Sakura said firmly, her almost accusing eyes not lost on Ino. Now, don't get all lecturing on me, Haruno. You, who've yet to kiss a man, let alone date one. Geez, why do you make it sound like it's a mortal sin? Grumbled Sakura, torn between mortification and annoyance, the latter winning finally as she glared at the blonde girl. It is a sin, at your age, Ino exclaimed. Sakura glared even harder at her. Hey, I'm 22, not 100 years old. She protested, rubbing her temple, a dull headache beginning to grip her. What is it with everybody nagging me about my love life? She fumed to herself. It was as if she wore a banner on her forehead saying, Nag me, I'm single. The way she had been getting comments on her single status recently. Her mother had been at it since some time now, her most used argument being that she was getting old. There had even been this random old woman at the hospital, who had snarkily commented that at her age, Sakura should find herself a husband. By Shinobi's standard, 22 years is considered old. Ino said dramatically. Ino. Sakura felt like banging her head on the table. It was great to be able to have lunch together, to catch up some girls' talk, but she now wanted to throttle the friend of hers. You don't know when we can get killed in duty, Ino insisted. Your life could end tomorrow and you would have died not knowing one of the pleasures of life. In case you've conveniently forgotten, we've been at war during the past years. Romance or the pleasures of life was the last thing on my mind. Sakura retorted indignantly. They have had this argument so many times that she felt like a broken replaying recorder. Blonde brows arched. It's been almost 2 years since war is over now, so that's not an excuse. Sakura sighed. True, war had been over for 2 years now, but the rebuilding up of the almost totally destroyed Konoha had been as strenuous as the war itself. It had taken 2 hard, long, painful years, but they had made it. Most of the destroyed buildings had been rebuilt and life was slowly getting back to normal. Finally, their beloved village, once more, stood in its proud glory. Ino's eyes suddenly got a telltale thoughtful look, which made Sakura squirm in her seat. I could arrange a date with that guy for you, she mused, looking behind Sakura, presumably at her mysterious persistent admirer whom Sakura had yet to see. Ino. Growled Sakura menacingly, don't even think about it. Besides, I'm not going to hook up with the first guy coming my way because you feel that I'm getting too old. You should know me better than that. But of course, Yamanaka Ino was not one to drop her most favorite topic, romance. Concerning Sakura, on top of it. Okay, no stranger for you, she conceded. Let's look into someone you know, then. You have to at least start somewhere, forehead. That only made Sakura quiver with nervousness. She felt that the conversation was steering into dangerous waters. Are you totally sure that Sasuke is out of your list? Ino ventured, and Sakura expelled a sharp, warning sigh, a vein ticking on her forehead as she glared at her friend. Guess yes, the blonde hastily retracted, waving her hands defensively in front of her. She could understand Sakura's reaction, as she herself had gotten over the Uchiha. Both girls had been able to wrap up that part of their life, with the conclusion that their childhood crush for Sasuke had just been that a huge, juvenile crush of 2 12-years-old girls. Ino gave a whimsical smile. We finally did it, eh? She murmured, her eyes drawn in the past. The 2 most ardent Uchiha fangirls, and the 2 biggest rivals, we finally got over him. More so when he's back here in Konoha, single, available, and you must agree, still as cool as ever. A slow responding smile appeared on Sakura's face. Yes. We did it, she thought. It had taken a lot of hurt emotions and self-evaluation to finally admit that whatever she had felt for Uchiha Sasuke had been a 12-years-old little girl's dreams, and nothing more. The older she had got, the more wisdom she had acquired, the more Sakura had realized that the feelings she had always harbored for the boy had been so futile. The Sasuke she had always chased after didn't really exist. For so many years, she had clung desperately to a false image in her heart. She had created a Sasuke which she had wanted in her mind, and finally, she had to agree that she had always chased a mere fantasy. When Sasuke had finally returned back to Konoha, that feeling had been concluded. The young man who had faced her had been a total stranger, albeit with traces of her 12-year-old former teammate, which had been the driving factor that she and Naruto had held on and slowly rebuild their bond of friendship with him after all. It had been liberating to learn that she had indeed got over her childhood crush on the boy. Sakura was so immersed in her own memories that she missed the devilish gleam in her friend's eyes. What about our Hokage? The coy voice broke her through her thoughts. Sakura immediately snapped her attention back to her friend. The suggestive way the blonde was waggling her eyebrows made Sakura suspicious that she had been angling towards this particular topic since the beginning. Schooling her features into a neutral expression, emerald eyes guarded, she replied casually, "What about him?" Ino gave an impatient sigh. "Come on, billboard brow, what do you intend to do about what you try so hard to hide?" Ino smirked as Sakura did a double take. "What do you mean? Sakura, we've been friends, then rivals, then friends again for ages now. Trust me, I know when you are interested in someone." "It's nothing like that," protested Sakura. "He's as my friend. My best friend. So, naturally I tend to look after him." Ino rolled her eyes. "Okay, whatever makes you feel safe, but seeing that he has always had a crush on you, why don't you two get together?" "Ino, please," Sakura groaned, as she rubbed the ridge of her nose, feeling her headache mounting. "What? You know that he'll jump at the occasion of going out with you," Ino persisted, scrutinizing the medic nin's face closely. "And you must admit that he's not a bad catch at all. He's so hot." Sakura willed herself not to get too reactive. "You're wrong," she said quietly, "he's long over his crush for me." "No, he's not," Ino insisted. "He has never gone out with anyone too, it must be because he still feels for you. I'm sure he would be more than willing to go out with you if you show the slight interest." Sakura felt she had to stop this conversation, now. She did not like the way their Hokage was being talked about, as if he had a weak point. It felt so demeaning to him. "Ino, stop it. He's no more than 12-year-old boy." Ino opened her mouth to protest, but Sakura quickly pressed on. "The only reason he has not gone out with anyone yet is because he has been so dedicated in his Hokage duty," she said, looking at the blonde girl almost accusingly. "He had been devoting all his time to protect the village, you know that. It doesn't mean that he's not interested in you anymore." Ino argued. "Why don't you ask him out and see?" Sakura remained silent, trying to keep her cool. Ignoring her friend's mounting exasperation, Ino continued, "Sakura, we're emancipated women, we should not be expected to sit back lamely and expect a man to fall on our lap. If you like someone, take things in your hands, why should you hesitate to make the first step?" "Ino," Sakura hissed, fighting to keep her voice low so as not to attract attention. "Emancipated. In case you don't know, at 12 years old, I confessed to Sasuke that I loved him, and all I got in return was a, 'thank you,' and was knocked unconscious and left on a cold bench for the night. At 16 years old, I told Naruto that I love him, and what I got this time was an, 'I hate people who lie to themselves.'" Her green eyes glowered with the memories as she glared at her friend. "Trust me, I've had my share of taking first steps and being rejected, enough to last me for a lifetime." Ino stared open-mouthed at her. "Sakura." A short silence ensued. Sakura took a deep breath to calm herself. She began to feel guilty for her outburst. Ino had only meant well, she should not have flared at her like that. "Ino, I'm sorry. I overreacted." She looked apologetically at her friend. No, I'm the one who's sorry," Ino interrupted quietly. Sakura, not liking the dejected look on Ino's face, forced a laugh. "Hey, Ino pig, don't be so glum. Life goes on," she said with a forced gaiety. She did not want pity. "Sakura, this does not negate the fact that you do have feelings for him." Sakura was about to vehemently deny the statement again, but the shrewd eyes of her friend stopped her. She gave an inner sigh of defeat. "It's of no importance, anyway. I was too late," she said in a low voice, giving a nonchalant shrug and avoiding the sharp scrutinizing gaze. "That's called karma," she continued derisively. "When he was interested in me, I always rejected him. Remember the bitch I was back then? Eventually, when everything was set that I started to get interested in him, it seemed that he was already over whatever he felt for me." The derisive tone did not fool Ino, she could detect a flash hidden pain behind those green orbs. "Sakura, we were all 12 years old drama queens and bitches at that time. Surely you can't be beating yourself about that. Well, he does deserve someone who does not have the taint of having been nasty to him, ever. Sakura. Ino gaped at her, dismayed. Hey, it's okay, Ino. I'm fine. She flashed a reassuring smile. I'm not 12 years old anymore, I have other priorities than my heart story. I'm happy with my life. Grabbing her chopsticks, she made a big deal out of filling her plate from the platter which they were to share. Now, let's get back to these delicious tempuras while they are still hot, and tell me about the admirer of yours, she said firmly. Maybe I can help you to find a way to put him definitely off. XOXOX. On her way back to the hospital a while later, Sakura automatically rose her head towards the Hokage Monument Mountain. A small smile, holding a mixture of fierce pride and tenderness, broke out on her face as she gazed at the latest addition to the mountain, Konoha's sixth Hokage. He had not been too keen to have his face carved at that time, claiming that it was not a priority, that Konoha needed the funds for more important things. But his protests had been unanimously swept away. Everybody had wanted to see the effigy of their beloved hero as soon as possible up along the other Hokages. The dozen sculptors who had worked on the portrait had done a fantastic job, Sakura thought once again. Even though it was carved in cold stone, they had managed to capture the unique warmth which the Rokudime, Uzumaki Naruto, always emitted. Sakura's thoughts went back to the conversation she had with Ino. It was true what she had told her friend, she was content with her life. Just as many predicted, namely, Jiraiya, Chio and Kakashi, Sakura had surpassed Tsunade, her master, in both the medical field and battlefield. The girl who came from a civilian family, who had no bloodline limit or shinobi legacy given to her, had worked extremely hard and had managed to overcome all the obstacles to rise high. She was now a name which was recognized and very much respected throughout the 5 nations. She had finally made the summoning contract with the slugs, feat which had been possible with her mastering the chakra reserve technique taught by Tsunade. The chakra reserve has also raised her to many higher levels of ninjutsu, genjutsu, and had further perfected her medical ninjutsu. She now occupied 2 very important positions as a kunoichi, one as head medic nin of Konoha, with Tsunade as consultant and Shizune shouldering her, and the other, most important for her, as the med nin security escort of the Hokage. Just as Gaara, the Kazekage, always moved with Temari and Kankura by his sides, the Rokudime did not move without his 2 escorts, one being Sakura. And Sakura prized that position above all. As his escort, she could accomplish the vow she had made to herself long ago, that to do all she could to protect her cherished friend, now their Hokage. Naruto. If on one hand, one truth was she was definitely over Uchiha Sasuke, on the other hand, her feelings concerning her blonde former teammate was a conclusion which she had carefully kept locked within herself, and avoided to ponder upon. Whatever burgeoning feelings she had developed for him had been stalled at a status quo. It's not as if she had much choice too. He had seemed so sure of himself when he had implied that she was lying to herself, those years ago. She did not have the emotional stamina to go through another part of her life by trying to prove her feelings to someone again. She was done chasing loves which finally, maybe were never destined to be hers. Though she may have become an impressive kunoichi to be feared and respected, when it concerned heart matters, she was still more vulnerable than most. But she worked hard not to let her life be overruled by her romantic emotions. She and Naruto may not be romantically involved, but the closeness they already shared was precious above all. She was happy with that. He was her best friend, her buddy, her confidant, and still a bit her punching bag. What they shared was sweat and blood and tears and an unbreakable bond, and she fiercely treasured that bond. She would never do anything to jeopardize that bond, even if it meant having to stifle her feelings. She sighed wistfully as the hospital came into view. As soon as she set foot in the familiar setting, her mind immediately tuned into the work awaiting her. She could not have the luxury of doing otherwise. XOXOXO. I can't believe that it's 6 years already. cheeks slightly flushed, brown eyes slightly blurred with pain which she tried to hold, the former fifth Hokage gave a deep sigh and took another sip from her sake cup. Yeah, the low, gruff voice of Uzumaki Naruto resonated, as he gazed at the kanji which was etched in the stone, kanji which himself had etched years ago. Teacher, it said. It was the 6th anniversary of the death of Jiraiya. The two Hokages, the former Godime, which had stepped down from her position 2 years back in the actual Rokudime, sat cross-legged in front of the tombstone, the warm summer sun shining down on them. Tsunade had ceremoniously set out 3 cups, she brought spares, just in case, she said, and a bottle of sake, and the two made a toast to the much-missed Sanin. Naruto solemnly took slow, tiny sips of the only cup he's had so far, never having had a liking for the thing, while Tsunade was at her umpteenth cup, thus the flushed cheeks. They made a striking pair. Both blonde, one tall, lithe, subtle muscle exhibiting the vitality of young strength and masculine, the other emanating wisdom of numerous years, still curvaceously beautiful and feminine. He wouldn't have wanted us to still mope for his death, Tsunade said whimsically. He said his job was to help the next generation and set a good example for them, that he'll gladly put his life on the line, and keep smiling throughout. A silence fell over them, as both set out in a short journey of memories. Giving a mental shake, Tsunade expelled a deep sigh. War is over, life goes on. She raised her cup to take another swig of the fiery drink. Naruto looked at the almost empty bottle of sake, deep affection etching in the cerulean eyes. And you still drown them like a champ, he teased. He grinned as she glared at him. Hey, Gaki, don't go too cheeky on me now, she warned. As if I would, he quickly retorted, mock scared, the blue eyes dancing. Tsunade contemplated the handsome face of the young man. Face, which, much to her dissatisfaction, had been too serious and rarely smiling the past couple of years. He was a far cry from the little 12-years-old boy she had met for the first time those years ago. His face was now leaner, more angular, masculine, though he still wore his hair in the same spiky, untamed style, his body was totally cut and excluding a subtle power which the red Hokage robes did not hide. And he now towered over her, having undergo his last growth spurt. His ascension to the much-cherished title has not been an easy task. She recalled the fight she had with some of the council members 2 years back when she had announced her intention to retire and proposed him as her next successor. One of the main front of resistance had been that he was too young for the job. While they were indeed right in some ways, at only 20 years old, Naruto had still lacked some of the maturity that was needed to rule a village. She had argued that if there were anybody who could really take care of Konoha and protect the village thoroughly, it would be him. He was already the popular choice and approved by the mass as the future Hokage, being the hero several times by then. Another claim had been that he had not had any students or apprentice studying under him. Tsunade would never forget the opposer's expression of dumbfoundedness when Ibuzu had immediately contested that. Sarutobi Konohamaru, grandson of the late third Hokage, and my student, had been Uzumaki Naruto's unofficial apprentice since he was 7 years old, he had proudly announced. Among many jutsus, Naruto had taught him the sexy jutsu _. You count that as a teaching? Had immediately scoffed Kaharu Udatane. It shows what a poor teacher the demon fox child is. She had said spitefully. And the Rasengan. Gasps of shock had resonated in the room. It was widely known that the fourth jutsu, the Rasengan, was mastered by a very selected few. For someone to have taught it, and the learner to have mastered it, was quite a big feat. But still, the feudal lord had hesitated, and wanted Tsunade to maintain her position for a longer while. It was only when Tsunade had revealed that her lifespan had dramatically decreased due to her chakra reserve having been overused too many times, and her only hope to extend her life was to retire from the shinobi life, that the feudal lord began to give in. The decision was finalized when Nara Shikaku had intervened, and vetoed that Naruto being undoubtedly the strongest shinobi of Konoha, the Hokage title was his by right. And Naruto was made the 6th Hokage of Konoha. Tsunade felt a bit bad that his much-cherished dream had been realized at a very difficult time, when Konoha had been bent totally on its knees by war. But the young man had pulled through with flying colors. Due his uncanny, unique ability to win people over, and his vast network of international friendships, much help had come forth to reconstruct Konoha, and old alliances had re-solidified even stronger. Looking at him now, and seeing his achievements, she was so glad that her decision had been right. But she dearly hoped that it was not at the cost of him losing his unique, sunny character. Naruto, don't try to grow old too fast, she said softly. Don't let yourself get brittled into a work-addicted man. Blue eyes looked quizzically at her. I though you always complained that I was too immature, that I needed to tone down a bit. The older blonde smirked. Well, true, but I miss the knucklehead that you were, she admitted. Just don't let yourself be hardened into a dark being. Naruto grinned widely, his eyes creasing in the old familiar way as he did. Don't worry, Ba-chan, he chuckled. His thoughts went to his mother, Kushina. After all, being a knucklehead is in my blood, he said softly, as the memory of the cheerful attitude that his mother had when they first met in the Fox realm, despite all the hardship that she had been through, came to his mind. Tsunade smiled ruefully, knowing exactly what he was making allusion to. Kushina, yes, it's unquestionable that you have inherited her character, she agreed. He felt a deep sense of pride at her words. The painfully brief time he had met his mother had been enough to make him love her with all his being, and any illusion that he resembled her fill him with a fierce pride. Thankfully things are looking much better now, Tsunade said after a short silence. It's high time you relax and have some fun. Time for romance. A mischievous glint crept into her eyes as she looked at him. Surely it's not too difficult, what with the horde of willing, screaming fangirls that you now have at your heels. Hey, it's not as if I ask for that type of attention. Naruto protested, a pink hue creeping up his cheeks. Well then, do you have someone particular in mind? She queried. She had a knowing look in her eyes while she observed him carefully. Oh yes, he did have someone in mind. He has had her in mind ever since his tender childhood. He did not reply immediately, his thoughts on his mother again. Find a girl like me to love. Kushina had told him, and he could not think of anyone who would be more similar to Kushina than the one he had always had in mind. Yes, I do, he finally murmured, his thoughts on the scariest, most hot-tempered, most loud-mouthed and smartest kunoichi of their generation in Konoha. The one for whom his heart had always raced. Sakura-chan. But actually doing something about it was another whole story. Tsunade smirked, guessing who his thoughts were onto and guessing the reason of his hesitance. Don't be discouraged by past refusals, Naruto. Among the last words of your teacher said, she pointed her chin towards the memorial stone at this, was that, getting rejected always makes a man stronger. Naruto chuckled, internally agreeing. He noticed the deeply sad and remorseful look that had crept onto the woman's face. If only, she sighed heavily. If only I could turn back time, she thought, at the same time chiding herself for the weak, foolish hope. It was too late for regrets now. Naruto, some things need to be done in their right due time, and I think now is the good time for you to make your move, she said softly, firmly. Take some time for yourself, for your personal life, you highly deserve that. XOXOX. Your shadow must be somewhere around. Tsunade asked later, as the two made their way back to the village. Naruto chuckled, yeah, he was technically outside Konoha, even though they were just on the outskirt of the village, so naturally as Hokage, he would have someone at his tail. He was glad that it was one of his two security escorts, not some anonymous Anbu. He stopped at a tall tree. The glacial aura was too obvious to be missed. Tem, are you sleeping up there or what? He called out. Silence. The next instant, with a graceful landing, Uchiha Sasuke appeared besides the two. We are done, Naruto announced cheerfully, stating the obvious. Sasuke nodded a greeting at Tsunade. Watching the two, Tsunade felt a nostalgia swelling up her stomach. Her old team, consisting of Jiraiya, Orochimaru and herself, had been a mirror image of the legendary Team 7. But with totally different outcome, though. Where her own team had failed, Team 7 had succeeded. Team 7 had been reunited again. It shows that the new generation would indeed always surpass the older one, she thought. Naruto smirked at Sasuke. Hope you weren't too bored up there. He asked, only to be met by an expressionless face. Oh, I forgot, snakes like to bask under the sun, right? He added slyly. This time he was met with a narrowed glare, the black eyes flashing. Naruto's grin widened. Any reaction from his cold, silent friend made him feel triumphant. One of his most prided achievements was that he had managed to bring his best friend, his brother, home. After all the long years of chasing after him, the final step has been almost easy, finally. When he had, at last, faced the Uchiha, the long-awaited, destined confrontation, Naruto had struck a deal with him. If I defeat you today, you have to give me your word that you would return back to Konoha. You will have to make the pledge to become a shinobi of Konoha again. Sasuke had laughed arrogantly. You really think you can beat me, Dobi? He had sneered. I'll crush you in a jiffy. The more reason that you shouldn't be scared to give me your words then, right? Naruto has shrugged. Okay. Just on a whim, I'll agree to the foolish deal of yours. Many things had driven Naruto that day when he had fought with Sasuke. The vow that he had made to himself to save his bond with his friend, to save the wish that both their mothers made, that they would be friends, to save the wish of Sasuke's mother, who had expressed to Kushina her wish that Sasuke become a good shinobi. And not least, Sakura's words to him just before he had stepped into the fight. Promise that you will get out of this safe, she had growled, eyes flashing with an indescribable emotion. You are way more important to us. If you let something happen to you, I swear I'll punch the daylights out of you. Sasuke had been wild with rage when his Amaterasu failed to harm Naruto, who had been protected by Itachi's power. As Amaterasu has faded out, Itachi's image had briefly appeared to him, and had again appealed him not to follow the power-crazed Madara. It's up to you to choose who you want to follow now. The ones who had always cared for you, or the one who is only using you as a tool and has caused the downfall of your own clan. I really expected more from you than being a mere, weak puppet to such a man as Madara. It was not a defeat of Sasuke against Naruto on that day, it was more an eye-opener for Sasuke, and an acceptance of what had always awaited him, his home, his two teammates, and people who really cared for him. A month later, Naruto and Sasuke combined their forces and finally brought Madara down. That fight had been epic. Wind element combining with fire, eye power combined with body power, the lethal combinations. Madara did not have any chance in front of their combined force. Back to the village, Sasuke had to undergo the trial that had been awaiting him. The still allied force at that time had followed the trial closely, as it had been quite a controversial case. The major role he had played in bringing down Madara, stopping the war and bringing peace to the world could not erase his past crimes. He had had to face the accusation of being a deserter, for attacking the Cage Summit and killing many samurai in the action, and for killing Danzo. Finally, the verdict had fallen. He was stripped of his Mangekyou Sharingan, and a bird cage seal of the Hyuga clan was placed on him, and he was imprisoned for a year. His punishment has been quite lenient because the allied force had to grudgingly admit that without him, Madara would not have been brought down. Sasuke had willingly agreed to the verdict, he had wanted to redeem himself. A long year later, he had finally released. It had been a slow, painstaking process to get the Uchiha to open up to his two teammates. But with the dedication of Naruto and Sakura, they reached there. The village were more willing to accept him now. And when Naruto had announced his intention to take Sasuke as his personal bodyguard, Many had openly voiced their disapproval of such decision, claiming how such a traitor could be given such an honor. But the new Hokage had not budged from his decision. Though it had shocked many, Naruto had asserted his total trust on the Uchiha, proclaiming that he knows that Sasuke would protect him with his life. And he had not been wrong. As soon as they reached the gates of Konoha, Tsunade parted ways with them, leaving the two to make their way through the village. As usual, all the people they crossed enthusiastically greeted them, the two famous friends, totally opposing in looks and character, yet both attracting attention to the same intensity. Naruto smiled. Life was good. He had been able to achieve most of his dreams. Now remained to woo the girl of his heart. What's the silly smile for? Naruto slid a glance across his friend. He had been thinking about dropping by the hospital. What's the scary look for? He countered. Sasuke sighed. What are your plans for now? He asked instead. I think I'll drop by the hospital. Black eyes slanted sideways towards him. In this case, I'll leave. I have some things to attend to. Naruto frowned. Was it his imagination, or had Sasuke had been avoiding them the past couple of weeks? You're welcome to come by too, he said. No. Are you avoiding us? Don't be paranoid, Sasuke said lazily. Naruto eyed him, suddenly serious. He had never dared openly ask Sasuke about his feelings for Sakura. Sure, he had never showed any romantic inclinations towards her, but still, with Sasuke, one can never tell. The Uchiha was as closed as clam when it came to emotions, and things would be tricky if he had an interest in her. Ba-chan was telling me that it's the right time to make a move. Black eyebrow raised questioningly. To find a girl, Naruto said. She's right. So, I was wondering, you and Sakura. Sasuke flashed him narrowed gaze and gave an impatient sigh. Do you need to ask that? At the blonde nervous silence, he snorted. You know that I never had anything like that for her. She wasn't as just a teammate. Nothing more. Naruto remained silent, though he was relieved to hear that. Sasuke the blonde friend from the corner of his eyes. T'chage. You're moving too slowly. If you want something to come out of this, do something. Don't just wait for things to fall into your lap. I've been making myself scarce so that you two can work things out. Make good use of it. With the longest speech that the Uchiha had probably made till his return to Konoha, he walked away, leaving Naruto looking open-mouthed after him. XOXOX. As Naruto approached Sakura's office, he heard her clear, low grumble coming from the open door. Gah, why do I always have so much paperwork? A better question would be, Naruto's deep, gravely voice made Sakura gave an involuntary yelp as she snapped her head up from the high pile of reports to see the blonde young man propped against the doorframe, arms crossed casually, grinning widely. Why was paperwork ever invented? He finished. Can't you knock? She looked like a child caught in the act of having her hand in the cookie jar. The prim and proper, meticulous medic Nin did not like being caught with anything that hinted at her slacking, most especially not by their Hokage, whom she was always chastising about being too slow on his paperwork. At an already open door. And miss your complaint. Blue eyes danced in laughter at her discomfort. Paperwork are very important. It keep clear tracks of what is being done. She recited what she was always drilling in his mind whenever he complained about that aspect of being the Hokage, though he delegated most of the paperwork to his two secretaries which he had recruited. It's just that today I had particularly a lot of reports and since I took a long lunch break, I'm lagging, she grumbled, going back to her attempt to locate a specific report from the pile. Sakura-chan, it's okay to admit that paperwork is a pain. He chuckled, at the same time surreptitiously let his eyes drink the sight of her. He couldn't help himself. He gave an inner sigh. The more the years had gone by, the older he got, the more intense his feelings for her had become. His admiration and respect for her had only increased. Added to the mix was now a growing longing, an increasing desire for her. Physical desire. That ever-present basic human need. But he was no more that brash 12 years old boy. He knew there would be consequences to his words and action. She was probably the closest friend that he had, his most precious person, and he did not want to risk jeopardizing that bond by doing anything thoughtless and rushed. Furthermore, he doubted that things would be easy, what with his rejection of her confession years back. He had been harsh, but he could not have accepted her immense sacrifice back then. It would not have been fair to her if he accepted her at that point. He had not wanted to interfere for the feelings she still might had for Sasuke, despite her saying the opposite, not when they had been so close to their aim, after all those long, hard-working years to get Sasuke back. He had not wanted to be responsible for regrets she might have had if she were to discover afterwards that she still loved Sasuke, despite everything. It had been horribly hard, holding his feelings in tight check the following years, but he had to do it. For both their sakes. When Sasuke has returned, he had patiently waited to see how things would proceed, even going as far as staying away from them for a while to give them the space needed. But she had never showed any deeper affection for the Uchiha than mere friendship. She had Sasuke within arm reach the whole time, and yet she never showed any hint of wanting to be romantically involved in him. It was a bit more than 2 years that Sasuke had been back now, long enough for her to have sorted her feelings for the Uchiha, and a light of hope had started to build up within Naruto. He just hoped that he was not too late. It's never okay to slack. Her stern voice broke his thoughts. He held his hands up. Okay, I take back what I said. He grumbled. So, you've had lunch already? Yep. Ino and I decided to try the new tempura house, she said, triumphantly retrieving the report she had finally managed to find. He felt disappointed. He had been thinking about asking her for ramen. You should give it a try, she suggested, giving an exasperated huff at his doubtful expression. Don't you ever get tired of ramen? Sakura-chan, he protested, as usual obfuscated on how anyone could suggest that he would ever get tired of his beloved ramen. You know that me and ramen, it's a lifetime love story. He said solemnly, palming his chest on his heart area, making her roll her eyes in exasperated amusement. At least now you do have some veggies in your diet, she remarked, satisfied that the weekly food shopping she monitored for him, since a coup of years now, contain a variety of fruits and vegetables that she ensured he ate. She had been quite surprised when he had been readily agreeable to the new diet. She had expected a lot of grumbling and arguments. Seeing that he was still standing by the door, she motioned the empty chair by her desk. But he shook his head. I'll go and grab a quick lunch. You haven't eaten yet. She frowned as looked at her desk clock. It was almost 1400. It's Ero Sennin's anniversary today, he explained quietly. Her eyes immediately warmed. He and Tsunade always went to the memorial stone on the anniversary. It was a ritual neither missed. She knew how much both of them still missed Jiraiya. She crossed the office to move to his side, and gave his arm a light squeeze, trying to pass on some comfort. 6 years already. It seems like yesterday, she mused. He looked down at her, being taller than her by at least a foot now. Time flies, only the memories remained. And the strength he has instilled in all of us. Giving a sigh, he reluctantly straightened himself. I'll leave you to your work, then. Take care. With a cheery wave, he left. She wondered whether she should have still accompanied him for lunch, but she did have lots of paperwork to complete, and a late operation scheduled. She really could not afford another break. XOXOX. Later that day, Naruto stood at the wide-glassed window of his brand new Hokage office, looking out at the village spread in front of him. Konoha, his beloved village. His love for Konoha and its inhabitants was so fiercely encompassing that he had never thought twice to invest all he had, sometimes more than he had, for them. He had never backed out from stretching himself thin to cater for everything and everyone during the difficult after-war time. And he was lucky to have a strong support from his friends, without whom he would have been surely run down by the massive task of taking over the village at such a difficult time. His face darkened when he thought about all that they've lost during this war. He was at least greatly thankful that the major loss had been buildings, that the human loss had been kept to the barest minimum. All the civilians had been safely sheltered in the secret hideout, reason why he had allocated a handsome share of the reconstructing finance into reinforcing the shelter again. And most of the Konoha shinobi war force still stood. He had made sure that he protects as much shinobi as he could during the war. Amy, his secretary, a kunoichi in her 30s, came in the office. Sai-san called for a meeting. He is on his way, she informed him, as he turned to look at her. He frowned. Sai was now an Anbu captain, chief of the secret ops. His task comprised, among many others, to gather information on what was happening around in the other nations. For him to call for meeting mean that he had some serious news to impart. Okay. Send him in as soon as he arrives, he told Amy, and she left with a nod. He walked back to his old desk. The Hokage Tower being the last building to be built, the office was still bare, saved for the old desk and chairs borrowed temporarily from the academy. He had preferred to direct the funds into more important matters. A carpenter was supposed to work on the furniture and fixtures the following week, but he was in no hurry. Some while later, Naruto had Amy calling out some other members of the Hokage team for a meeting. What Sai had to tell was important enough to be shared with them. Slowly, one by one, they all arrived, all greeting him by his name. It was one of the things that Naruto had insisted upon, that none of his close ones called him by the formal Hokage title. Himself having always disregarded calling the two previous Hokages by their titles, he could not digest the thought of his close friends calling him Hokage-sama. He looked around at his team. Among the first thing he did when he took seat as the Hokage was to build a team in which he could place his total trust, a team which he was comfortable with. The Hokage team, as he liked to call it, his most important, vital cell, which had shouldered him throughout the hard time. Not surprisingly, most the members were from the 10 teams of his genin graduation year. Nara Shikamaru, probably the most intelligent man out there, as his intelligence ops and strategist. Hyuga Neji, as his chief of defense security. Sai as his chief of secret ops. He was shouldered by Ino, who attended meetings when he was out for missions, which was quite often. Sakura as chief medic nin. Sasuke, as his right-hand man. Also members of the team, though only present for more important meetings, were Kakashi and Tsunade, acting as elders and consultants. The council, comprising of all the clan leaders, still existed, though they only interfered in major decisions, same as it was with the previous Hokages. With such an outstanding team by his side, Konoha could only shine, Naruto thought proudly. As the initial clatter subdued, Sai was the one to open the meeting. There had been an unusual attack in a small village found on the Kumo-Kiri border, he told the others, having already briefed Naruto. Naruto glided a report towards Neji, the first one sitting to his side. 6 patrolling Kumo shinobi have been found dead. No signs of battle, and the cause of death unidentified. The attacker or attacker's target is still unknown, as the village does not hold anything of value. None of the locals are implicated, at least not yet, Sai reported. Sakura raised her eyebrow questioningly. What do you mean, cause of deaths unidentified? All 6 of them had died in the same way. There were no external or internal injuries, no poisoning detected, nothing. The 6 shinobis just seemed to have died. That definitely caught Sakura's attention. You mean even the autopsy did not reveal any cause of death? We do not have the autopsy report yet, Sai replied, but the first unofficial news is such. Sakura frowned as she looked through the report which had reached her. The autopsy must have been carried out under the supervision of Mayuri, the head medic nin of Kumo village. She knew the man personally, having worked with him during the war. He was competent, but still, Sakura found it hard to accept that no cause of death had been found. Even under the rarest jutsu, shinobi's deaths are caused by the body failing at some sort. Shinobis were human beings, after all, and the 6 shinobis described in the report showed that they were standard Kumo Junins. Is that something to be worried about? Naruto asked Sakura. 6 healthy shinobi cannot drop dead without any valid reason, Sakura said slowly. Shiba Mayuri would not have missed the cause of deaths, if there would have been any. No one even questioned the validity of the reports. Sai would have investigated the case more than thoroughly for correct info before bringing it to the meeting. Unless there's someone in the League of Orochimaru out there, Sasuke slowly said. A deep silence followed his statement. That man had been able to do anything with the human body. He had transgressed all limits concerning the law of the human body. But he was dead, as was his apprentice, Kabuto. 6 powerful shinobis dead, all at once, all seemingly of the same cause, repeated Shikamaru. If we assume that they were assassinated, then it is cause for concern. The 5 nations have been at peace since the war now, so this eliminates any theory of attack from a foe nation. It means there is a new enemy group, with a new jutsu which we are not aware about, or, as Sasuke correctly said, someone with the caliber of Orochimaru, out there. An uneasiness gripped each of them. Such type of attack can only be perpetuated by a group, Neji declared, as the report lied open in front of him. For the shinobis to be attacked without any of the villagers having been aware of it, the attack must have been highly organized, smooth and swift. A single person would not have been able to achieve that, unless someone with incredibly immense powers. Naruto frowned. The idea of another terrorist organization threatening the peace which they had all fought so hard for angered him. He knew that he would have to keep a close tag on this case. It's been 2 days already, and Kumo had not made any progress yet in the investigation, Sai stated. I am working to gather as much intel as possible on that. I will immediately send a hawk to the wreckage. However much we would like to interfere, unless Kumo asks us for help, we cannot dip in, said Naruto, guessing that Sakura curiosity must be at the highest and wanting to have a look at the bodies herself. Keep a close eye on this, Sai, Naruto said. The dark-haired boy nodded. I'll increase our patrol force immediately, Neji announced. No one in room contradicted him. The 4th Ninja War had been instigated by a mere organization, after all, and they all unanimously agree that it was never too careful to be on alert, however remote the probability of an attack in Konoha there might be. Haruno-san, all 3 of them are stabilized now. Here's the report. Thank you, Yuki. Sakura took the report which her capable and efficient assistant, an 18-years-old Chunin, had handed her, and quickly scanned through it, taking notes of the regular stats. They were indeed all out of danger. Having shortly left the emergency room found on the ground floor, they stood in the busy main hall of the hospital, while medic nins and patients milled all around them. The day had started out very early and hectically. Sakura had been called urgently at the hospital at the crack of dawn to see to a team which had returned from a mission. It was a 3-man cell, and upon reaching the hospital, she found out that Konohamaru had been the leader of the team. All the 3 male shinobis had been in bad state, showing symptoms of severe poisoning. Fearing the worst, with the Kumo attack of the previous week still fresh on her mind, Sakura had put her whole team on high emergency alert. A team had immediately been set on treatment, while a second team set on testing the cause of poisoning by doing an armada of tests, from the stomach contents to the blood works. The tension had been paramount, the fear of an attack from an enemy slicking through the team as they've worked on the case. The test's results had been relieving and anticlimactic at the same time. It was wild mushroom poisoning. Not any dark and terrifying jutsu of an unknown enemy, as Sakura had feared. A mere wild mushroom poisoning, which could have been fatal had not been treated on time. Due to the mission being a simple D rank, no medic nin had been assigned to the team, and Sakura shuddered when thinking about the probable outcome had they been far from Konoha. As per the written rule of Konoha since Naruto's Hokage, a medic nin was always to be included in missions for an above sea level and comprising of more than 2 shinobis. In this case, the team had not qualified. The team had, From what Sakura had been able to gather, eaten some wild mushrooms picked near their camping site for dinner, mushroom which had not been edible. One of the basic things taught at the academy was to recognize edible food and spot out the toxic ones while on missions, and to have a whole shinobi team of chunin level going for a toxic mushroom was just unbelievable. How could 3 chunins be so stupid? Sakura thought for the umpteenth times, quite irked by the incident. She could not prevent the scowl from taking over her face. Wasn't it enough that the war had taken so many precious lives, and now some morons needed to have into a near-death situation because of some stupid mushroom poisoning? She made a mental note to inform Aruka about increasing the emphasis on the lesson of wild, edible food identification in the academy's curriculum. She did not want to have another such case again, where their shinobis could die by such futile reasons. Now, the worst was over, all trace of the mushroom toxins removed from their system, the proper antidote administered. Konohamaru. Is he all right? Extreme worry was apparent in the young girl's high, shaky voice, as a visibly distraught Moegi rushed over to Sakura. I just learned the news. How is he? How are they all? Moegi. Don't worry, Sakura said soothingly. He'll survive. She could not help her dry tone. He's sleeping right now. At the younger girl's questioning look, she explained. They ate some toxic wild mushrooms. Toxic mushroom, repeated Moegi. Sakura nodded. Yes. The orange, inedible one. For 1 second, Moegi stared at Sakura, open-mouthed. Then a deep scowl settled on her face. Oh the baka, she cried crossly. If he wasn't so intent on always being goofy in class instead of paying more attention to his lessons, he wouldn't have come to this. The only time Udon and I are not in his team for a mission and he goes and gets himself stupidly poisoned. Her voice rose in hot indignation and her face got redder. Sakura was wholeheartedly in agreement with the girl's indignation. Moegi was voicing exactly what had been on her own mind earlier. Ooh. Let him wake up. I'll give him a punch he won't forget so soon. Moegi growled, cracking her knuckles menacingly. His room is that way, pointed Sakura. Isn't it too early for visitors? Yuki asked worriedly, as she watched the steaming young girl marching towards the designated room. Nah, it's okay, Sakura smirked. Konohamaru can have the visit of his best friend. And the one who loves him to pieces, she thought to herself. She wondered when the idiot will realize that. Pulling her thoughts back to work, she called her team of medic nin students over for a quick summing up. From now on, I want 2 people on this case, Sakura briskly addressed the young group of 6 standing ceremoniously in front of her. Kira, she pointed to the tall young dark-haired man, and Yuki, you 2 monitor the 3 and check their stats every hour. The rest of you can go on to other cases now. Good job, all of you. The team had responded swiftly and efficiently to the emergency, and she was proud of their performance. She had trained them, after all. The rest of the group dispersed, while she carried on with the briefing with Kira and Yuki. A sudden commotion from the main entrance door made Sakura raise her head. She saw a visibly excited gathering crowding the doors, comprising of mostly the feminine staff, she noted, amidst which she saw the distinctive spiky blonde hair standing at least 1 foot taller than the crowd and red robe of their Hokage. And some steps back, the dark head of Sasuke. Naruto had come earlier to inquire about the 3 men. She had been right in the middle of treatment, so she had not been able to meet him. She had got a nurse to tell him that they were all going to be okay, and he had left, reassured. Sakura handed the report back to Yuki. Keep me posted on this, she told the 2 medic nins, not missing the twinkle in Yuki's eyes, before she started to make her way towards the crowd. Sakura-chan. The deep loud voice boomed out across the hallway, making her feeling harried. He still had not get over the habit of being obnoxiously loud when calling out to her, and no one seemed surprised by their Hokage thus seeking the head medic nin. They were all used to it. As she quickly walked over to Naruto, her sharp gaze noticed that he was holding his right arm up, close to his chest. And he was bleeding. That made her immediately frown. Reaching close enough, she asked, What happened to your arm? Her sharp tone and piercing green eyes made Naruto involuntarily nervous. I'll leave him to you now, Sasuke drawled almost lazily, ignoring the almost pleading look that the Hokage was sending his way. Before Sakura could even think of questioning the Uchiha, he was gone. How are the three? Naruto hurriedly asked. They are all fine, she snapped. What else can be expected of bakas who have nothing else to do than stupidly get harmed? He cringed. Poor Konohamaru, he's in for a good lecture when he gets better, he thought. But hey, it's me I should be worried about right now. And you still have not replied, what happened to your arm? She was already pulling the appendage to have a look. She saw a small, deep wound, like a bullet hole, slightly above his inner wrist, from which he was bleeding profusely. She raised frowning, questioning eyes to his. It's nothing, really, he said sheepishly. It's a nail. Huh, I was helping out with the furniture of the office. Sakura's eyes twitched. What was it with Konoha shinobi? She thought crossly. Even their leader was touched by the plague of stupidity or what? Here they were, she and her team working their souls out to save their people, and some idiots seemed to have so much fun by finding new means of getting themselves killed. Okay. Getting killed seemed to be overboard, their Hokage certainly would not be defeated by such a mere thing as a nail, but still. And since when you've become a carpenter? She asked almost acidly. But it was so fun. Sakura-chan, you should see the amazing tools that they have. He said with a boyish enthusiasm, blue eyes shining. He followed her as she wordlessly walked towards the nearest examining room. They have this sort of gun which fire out nails. Can you believe it? You don't need a hammer, the nails are gunned in whatever and wherever you want them to. She pointed to the examining table, and he meekly swung his body up and sat on it, putting his arm forward for her inspection. And the nail is now in your arm because. It was an accident. She huffed exasperatedly, and started to clean the perforated area to have a better look. Concentrating green chakra on her hands, she examined the wound. The scan showed a 1-foot-length nail lodged deep in the flesh, and had pierced a secondary vein. It may look insignificant at first glance, but left alone, he would have bled enough for it to be quite fatal. I'll have to remove this manually, she said shortly, setting off to the side table to sterilize some tweezers. Walking back to him, she sent him a glare. Do I really need to tell you to be more careful? She said crossly. Kyuubi can heal you, but can't extract things which should not be inside you. It was an accident, Sakura-chan. He looked contrite enough, the guilty blue eyes staring so earnestly back at her. Slowly, she felt her exasperation ebbed away. Who could remain immune to the entreaty of those warm, cerulean blue orbs, which remind her of the warm summer skies? She decided to let him off the hook, and set to work. Apart from a slight wince, he was silent throughout the process. When the nail was finally removed, she used some of her green chakra to heal the region, and soon enough, his auto-healing process set to work and the hole disappeared within seconds. Thank you, he said, as he watched her collecting the instruments. She just waved him off. Just be careful, okay? She warned, and walked him back to the entrance doors. It was difficult to miss the increased horde of female staff, from the youngest to the oldest, which had stopped or gathered in the main hall at the news that the Hokage was in the hospital, as they always did, all whispering excitedly and eyes alighting when the young, handsome Hokage waved at them. It seemed that all the female population of Konoha had the hots for their Hokage, Sakura thought with a grumble. At least you've made the day of the feminine population of the hospital, she smirked. A red tinge shot up Naruto's cheeks. Sakura-chan, not you too. He mumbled, embarrassed. XOXOX. Tem. What is it now? Sasuke did not even bother to open his eyes. He was meditating on the new Hokage Tower's roof. He had allowed himself the short respite while Naruto played carpenter. After all, who could harm the Hokage in his own office, deep within Konoha? Can you use your eye thingy to have a look at this? Black eyes snapped open. A short silence followed. No way. Not again. Well, how did you do that? Naruto scratched the back of his head. It just happened. I'm your bodyguard, not your nanny. And do you take my Sharingan to be your personal scan or what? Hey, come on, be a sport. Now, you're done for. That's for sure. Will you? Hopeful blue eyes looked at him. And get killed along with you. Sakura was busy checking a patient when a nurse hurried in the examining room. Haruno-san, it's the Hokage. Sakura looked up, frowning and immediately worried. What is it? It's been an hour since his treatment, and she had made sure his wound had been properly closed. Surely there could not be any complication from such a small wound, and so soon. He has been, wounded again. Pink eyebrows shot high at this. Wounded again, Sakura repeated, incredulous. Yes, carpentry accident wounds. For a second, Sakura stared at the nurse, mouth opened. What? She then exclaimed, incredulous. The nurse immediately hurried by the now nervous patient's side. Let me continue with the patient, Haruno-san, while you attend to the Hokage. It was an unspoken rule that if head medic Nin Haruno was in the hospital, the Hokage automatically gets treatment from her. Wordlessly, Sakura handed the stethoscope to the nurse, and sped out of the room. Sanyu was a carpenter from a small village of the Fire Country, a very good carpenter he was. As many small companies, he had jumped at the opportunity to come to reconstruct Konoha. He had been honored when his modest company had been designated to finish the Hokage Tower, and had been even more honored when the young Hokage had proposed to give a hand, finding it impossible to deter the enthusiastic young man from helping out. Being mostly non-aware of the Konohan people, he could not understand why Uchiha Sasuke, which was after all the Hokage right-hand man, had categorically refused to accompany the Hokage to the hospital, when the latter had, run into another accident. And the Hokage had needed to be accompanied, what with the difficulty in standing straight. I don't have such a futile and early death wish. You go ahead by yourself, the Uchiha had flatly told the Hokage. So, out of courtesy to the Hokage, he could not permit himself to let the Hokage go to the hospital unaccompanied. Sanyu decided to accompany him personally. When he saw the pink-haired lady, which apparently was the head medic Nin which the front desk nurse had hurried to fetch as soon as they've reached the hospital, he understood the refusal of the Uchiha. The young woman marching almost menacingly towards them looked very scary, green eyes flashing fires, face set in a deep, dark scowl, and Sanyu could swear that he could see black angry fumes escaping from her person. His first reaction as she advanced towards them was to cower behind the Hokage, but it seemed that the Hokage had the same idea, because in the blink of an eye, the carpenter found himself facing the formidable medic Nin head-on, and alone. Hokage-sama, the carpenter turned around nervously, only to find the young and mighty Hokage standing some steps back, peeping at the incoming scary lady. What happened? Sakura barked, flashing green eye impaling both men to the spot. It was an accident, the poor man stammered. Just an accident, Sakura-chan. Naruto vigorously nodded his head. With. Naruto gulped audibly. The nail gunner. She could feel a vein throbbing in her forehead. Her eye twitched furiously. Naruto. She growled. Who had been stupid enough to give this dunce of a Hokage the nail gunner again? She thought. Naruto quivered when he saw her clenching her fingers in a tight fist, while Sanyu finally found the use of his limbs again and had moved several steps away. Where? She barked again. Naruto nervously lifted the flaps of his robe and pointed towards his upper torso. She could see blood seeping from his orange inner shirt, the wound were on his right side. She could barely hold herself from punching the blonde. Her fist itched to make a satisfying, chakra-enhanced blowing contact on the knucklehead's head, but remembering that he was the Hokage now, and they were in a public area, she restrained herself. She satisfied herself by giving him a whack on the arm. She hoped that none of his organs had been punctured. To the examination room, she told him grimly. Turning to the carpenter, her eyes flashed ominously, she growled, You'd better make sure that your nail gunner does not get in the Hokage's hands again, understand? Yes, ma'am. Of course, ma'am, Sanyu replied hastily. Looking at their retreating back, the carpenter released a shaky breath which he had not even been aware of holding. Is she always so scary? He whispered, awed, to one of the nurse. When it concerns our Hokage's safety, yes she is, the nurse replied back. In the examination room, at Sakura's short command, Naruto was removing his robe and shirt, taking the safest approach in front of her temper, that of silence. I really don't need to treat you for these types of things, you baka. Her angry glare burned into him. Don't you have more important Hokage duties to do, like taking care of the village? He started, but she cut him off. How the hell have you managed to get nails here? She asked incredulously as she examined him with his green chakra-enhanced hands, bent over his lying form. The nails, too this time, were embedded on the side of his torso, beneath his armpits. And by sheer luck it seemed, they were buried in the flesh and muscles only, a little further it would have punctured his right lung. What were you doing with that nail gunner? She glared at him, before dabbing some antiseptics over the wounds and getting to work. He stuck to his best strategy of the moment, that of silence. As she extracted the first nail, she saw that it was a headless one, which would explain why his clothes had not stopped them. Of all the stupid things to do, she muttered under her breath. Though the extraction hurt a huge lot, worse than the first wound, Naruto could not help enjoying the attention in her henning. After the long years of dragged ordeal which they all had gone through, he welcomed the little lapse of normality that her scolding was bringing about. He could be called a masochist, but it gave him a fuzzy feeling when she scolded him like that. It showed that she cared enough. And he has to admit the feeling of her warm breath on his bare skin as she worked closely to his chest was doing wonderful things to his senses. She had raised the upper part of the exam table, so her face was close enough. I was trying to help, he broke the silence of her ruminating as she worked. As Hokage, I must be able to do some manual labor as well, right? He murmured, needing to say something as he watched her concentrated face. She gave him a dark look. Surely you had other means to help rather than jacking yourself with nails all the time. She snorted, as she carefully removed the second nail. The sharp pain made him wince, and he did not reply. The two nails removed, she directed her green chakra to the wounds, inspecting for any residue. Finding none, and satisfied that the extraction had been cleanly done, she focused the chakra on the gash and started to close it. She had lost count on how many times she had healed him since she had become medic nin. It was far from the first time that he stood near naked under her healing hands. Yet as her hands hovered over the broken flesh, she could not help but admire the familiar but ever-changing anatomy. He was so far from the young lanky boy she had started to heal, all those years ago. Her eyes made an appraisal of the smooth, tanned skin rippling over hard, steeled muscles. No over-bulging, showy muscles here, just the right amount of sleekness. He was superbly built, she thought for the umpteenth time. Nice wide shoulders and toned chest tapering into an appealing V-shape. And there was no mistake of the power emanating from him. He was the Hokage, after all, the strongest in Konoha, so naturally his body showed it. With her face bent over him as she worked, she was close enough to have his masculine scent tantalizing her nose, warm, earthy, with a hint of ramen. She felt a delicious shiver go up her back. Not surprising at all, she thought. With all the ramen that he ingested, she was sure that he must ooze out the thing through his pores. Will his skin have the taste of ramen as well? Her thoughts suddenly screeched to a halt at the turn they were taking. Whoa, what the hell was she thinking? She hastily snapped her thoughts back. At the same time, she realized that she had paused in her work, and had been staring at his bare chest for she had no damn idea how long. Giving herself a hard mental shake, she swiftly straightened up, avoiding to look at him directly. She could feel a heat starting up her neck as she turned away and busied herself with the medical instruments. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Good lord, I hope he had not realized that I was giving him a look over, she thought almost frantically. Sakura-chan. Naruto looked quizzically at her. Sakura steeled herself. There, you are done now, she said, working hard to keep her voice even as she turned to look at him. To her relief, apart from a slight puzzled frown, he looked clueless. And you stay away from that nail gunner, you hear me? Because trust me, if I hear that you've hurt yourself again by anything concerning furniture making, I'll tie you to a hospital bed so that you do not go near any tools at all, she threatened. He gulped, knowing that she could well follow with her threat. Sakura-chan, that's pushing it a bit far, he laughed nervously. She humphed darkly. Yuki came in the room at that moment. Sakura did not miss the slight blush that crept up the girl's face as she caught a glimpse of the Hokage's chest while he was pulling his shirt back on. Yes. Sakura's voice came out unnaturally sharp, making her assistant jump in nervousness. What is it with us female medic nins? Sakura thought almost sourly. We are supposed to be professionals and not get swooned by the sight of some flesh. Sorry to disturb you, Haruno-san, Yuki hurriedly said, you told me to let you know immediately when the patient Ken wakes up. Sakura nodded. Naruto stood up. Okay. Sakura-chan. I'll leave now. She opened her mouth, intending to lecture him some more, but sensing it, he hurriedly cut in. No more carpentry for today, I swear. He said solemnly. With a cheery wave, he was out of the room. Sakura listened half-mindedly as Yuki talked. She felt angry with herself. She had always prided herself about her professionalism at her work. When it concerns her duty as medic nin, she always strived to keep up the highest standard possible, and her lapse just now did not please her at all. It must be the conversation she had with Ino during their last lunch which was bringing all this about, she thought grumpily. She had been feeling a sort of restlessness since that talk, which was a week ago. Her nights had seemed a tad bit longer, her dreams often disturbing. It seemed that some buried feelings, which had been dormant during the war and post-war rebuilding years, were being brewed up to the surface. Still, it does not excuse my salivating like a sex-starved, crazy woman in front of some mere bare male chest, she chided herself. Well, his bare chest. Damn Ino, she thought again, banging her notepad down with more force than necessary, as a last thought flitted through her mind. It being his chest made all the difference. XOXOX. A week later, Naruto stood at the main gates of Konoha, his red Hokage robes flowing behind him by the wind, and as usual having refused to wear the Hokage hat, his blonde hair blowing freely, only held by his headband. Sakura and Shikamaru were by his sides, Sasuke discreetly some steps behind, as they greeted a Suna delegation, which consisted of Gaara, Kankuro, Temari, and a couple of Suna Anbu. Earlier that week, the Kazekage had sent a hawk announcing his visit to Konoha, his first official visit since Naruto was made Hokage. Naruto had been excited, and had been eagerly looking forward to the visit. Gaara. His voice rang out with warmth and pleasure, his eyes bright as he greeted his friend. The two young men stood face to face, savoring the moment, as they met for the first time as Kages. Hokage Dono, Gaara murmured, a slight smile at the corner of his mouth as he watched his friend. You look good in the Hokage robes, he said after a short scrutiny. Naruto grinned. I told you we would meet as Kages not before long, didn't I? Gaara nodded in amused agreement. I never doubted your words, he replied calmly. The first initial greetings from both group over, the young Kazekage turned towards Sasuke, who was standing some steps back. Uchiha Sasuke, he greeted. Sasuke nodded a greeting back. Gaara looked at the friend for whom Naruto had fought so hard. He was happy that the Uchiha had been given a second chance, having been himself being given a second chance. What with after spending his whole childhood bloodlusting after any other human being, he felt an affinity with the Uchiha. They had both shared a past terrible dark heart, and had both been saved by the unique Uzumaki Naruto. Hope your journey was fine, Sakura said, the ever-good hostess. Would you like to go straight to the guest house, or? I'd like a short introductory meeting with Yukanahan team first, replied Gaara, turning to look at Naruto. Let's go, said Naruto, leading the delegation towards the center, to the newly built Hokage Tower. Managed to get your lazy bones down here this early. Temari drawled, smirking at Shikamaru, as the two walked side by side. Shikamaru gave a long sigh. We were assigned to receive you guys, he said, his eyes lingering, despite himself, on the Suna Kunoichi. Temari sneaked a glance at him. Oh, means you wouldn't have come if it had not been assigned to you. She taunted. A red tinge crept up Shikamaru's cheeks. You're too troublesome, he muttered under his breath. Walking a few steps behind, Sakura watched the exchange with keen interest. She and the other girls of the 10 teams had been madly speculating about these two since the war. It was very difficult to say what was exactly going on between them. They highly suspected that there was something, but Shikamaru had always been a clam about it, despite the ardent badgering of the girls. And since none of the girls had met Temari since the war, the few Suna visits had been carried out by the Nara himself, they could not get any info from the Suna Kunoichi. It was clear that the major obstacle of distance would impede on anything concrete to develop, and Shikamaru being Shikamaru, he would have meticulously evaluated and extrapolated all the possibilities and the outcomes, but still, the vivid chemistry between the two was impossible to miss. Sakura and the others dearly wished that something would come out of it. And now, with Temari within their grasp, Sakura intended to pump the information out of her. It was a cheerful group which sat shortly in the Hokage's office, sharing news and having some drinks, nothing like the protocol-directed, formal atmosphere that one would have expected for an official visit of the Cage. It was not so surprising, it was the magic of the reign of the Rokudaime, Uzumaki Naruto. Nice decor, nice furniture, Temari remarked, as she looked around the brand new office. Sakura smirked. Yeah, it comes with the added bonus of our Hokage's blood. Temari blinked. I don't need to ask, she grinned finally. Still as clumsy as ever. Kankuro snickered. Sakura-chan. Naruto protested. You're giving away national secrets. Sakura only rolled her eyes, while the others chuckled. Soon, they settled down and discussed the schedules for the duration of the stay of the Suna delegation. Tsunade and Kakashi were to be present in all the meetings, while the council with the clan leaders was to be called for one single meeting, which would cover all the discussions that would need their input. There were many items on the agenda: bilateral treaties, open of trades between the two villages, and quite important in the list, discussions about the upcoming Chunin exams. The Cage wanted Suna to host the Chunin exams for that year, and wanted Konoha to lend their help in the events. Please don't forget you still have to return me the hospital inventory report, duly signed, Sakura told Naruto, as she rose from her seat. She was the last one to leave the office. Gaara wanted to discuss some further things with Naruto, Cage to Hokage, so they too had stayed behind. You see what type of a slave driver I have to cope with. Naruto told Gaara, sighing dramatically. Sakura rolled her eyes, Gaara's lips twitched. You don't know the meaning of slave driving, yet, Hokage-sama, she warned disdainfully. Sakura-chan. Naruto grumbled. He disliked it when she called him thus, and she knew that. See you later, Cage-sama, she bowed. Blue eyes followed the alluring sway of the lithe hips with utter fascination as she made her way towards the door and out of the office. She wore a black, above-knee-length skirt, with side slits showing the mid-thigh-length gray shorts she wore underneath, and her signature red-colored top, which was sleeveless and V-necked, with the white Haruno emblem at the back. The outfit flattered her soft-curved, slim body to perfection and showed off her long, fabulous legs. Black summer sandals, with wide bands rolling up to above her ankles completed the wonderful picture. You are still staring. It's been a full minute that she's gone. Naruto jumped, and turned to look at Gaara. He chuckled sheepishly, scratching the back of his neck. Shortly though, a slight frown marred his forehead, his eyes turning serious. What's troubling you? Gaara asked quietly. Naruto did not answer immediately. He looked unseeingly into blank air. After a short silence, he said in a low voice, I thought I had it under control since long now. But I feel so like a teenager again when she is around. The young Kazekage was unsurprised. The war is over, Konoha is rebuilt, he said simply. Naruto looked at him questioningly. Life resumes from where it stopped prior to war. Your urgent issues are over now. Your mind and heart is free again. Still, it's so very complicated, Naruto murmured, shaking his head. Gaara fixed his browless eyes steadily upon him. The Uzumaki Naruto finding something too complicated for him. Would you risk facing her punches? Naruto pointed towards the closed door. Or worse still, lose her. His voice dropped to a whisper, but Gaara still heard him. Nothing will happen if you don't take risks, Gaara calmly pointed out. And you will definitely not lose her, your bond is too strong for that. Just follow your heart, and act on your instinct. You're the third person to advise me on my love life lately, grumbled Naruto. And since when have you become an expert on such matter? He peered suspiciously at the expressionless face. The young Kazekage shrugged his shoulder, but could not prevent the slight blush from creeping up his face. Naruto looked at him in amazement. Who is it? He immediately pounced. Gaara avoided looking at him directly. You will know soon enough. Hopefully, he said. Is it Matsuri? Naruto pressed on. He knew Gaara had always been susceptible to the obvious admiration that Matsui, one of his very talented and beautiful Junin, had for him. The blush on Gaara's face deepened, confirming Naruto's suspicion. The blonde grinned widely, standing up quickly and walking over to his friend. Well, congratulations are in order then. He exclaimed happily, slapping the redhead on the back. Taken by surprise by the back slap, Gaara lurched forward. He was not used to this type of casual camaraderie, only Naruto would feel comfortable enough to give him such treatments. His face brightened with a small, rare smile. Whatever you do, don't let Temari know about it, he quickly appealed. Not yet. She will surely try to rush me. Naruto chuckled. Okay. Mouth zipped. Knowing Temari, he could understand Gaara's stance. How did you do it? He asked, still awed that Gaara had let his closed guard down enough to approach a girl. I followed my heart, Gaara simply said. Follow your heart, huh? Naruto pondered aloud. XOXOX. The tone of the gathering took a more solemn note later that afternoon, as a bigger group sat in the Hokage's office. After the Suna group had rested, Naruto called in a meeting with Team Hokage. The Suna group had some info to impart about the recent Kumo village attack, which he felt was better to be discussed with his whole team present. Tsunade and Kakashi had already been briefed about the attack, and it was Kankuro who opened the meeting. As per their intel, Killer Bee had supposed to be at the small village for a local festival, but due to very last-minute change, he did not make it. Apparently, the change of plans had been so last-minute that they did not have time to inform the village leader, said Kankuro. So, he was still expected as the festivities proceeded on. The tension of the Konohan group sharpened palpably at this new information. Kakashi's single visible eye was serious as he looked at Naruto. This opens the possibility of attack being targeted at Killer Bee, he said. Kankuro nodded. That's what we deduced too. It would explain that nothing was damaged or missing from the village, slowly agreed Sai. It was curious that with the 6 patrolling shinobi dead, nothing was taken or destroyed, the enemy would have had a free field. They wouldn't have met any resistance from the villagers, with none of them being ninjas. This leaves 2 possible causes of the attack, Shikamaru mused after a short silence. It's either an attack aimed at the Raikage and Kumo, or a direct aim for the Hachibi. We came to the same conclusion, said Gaara. So, if we go for option that it had been the Hachibi which had been the target, we must face the eventuality that there are some Jinchuriki trackers out there. A heavy silence fell on the room. Sakura's eyes widened at the implications. She felt a trickle of fear running down her back. Won't this nightmare ever be over? She looked over at Tsunade, and could see her clenched jaw. The older woman was concerned as well. The Raikage had not yet responded to my message, Naruto said, his face tight. Killer Bee was a good friend, and he did not like the idea that there was someone, or several people, out on the look for the Hachibi. If indeed Killer Bee had been targeted, you can be sure the Raikage would have put his best team on this case, said Tsunade. You know how protective he is towards Killer Bee. So, there's the possibility that Naruto could be a target as well, said Sakura, making a statement rather than asking a question as she looked from Kankuro to Gaara. Yes, the possibility runs high, Gaara affirmed. The war has lifted the strict secrecy of the Jinchuriki identities, and with only 2 Jinchurikis left, he glanced at Naruto, they both are easy targets now. Neji spoke up. All safety measures are already in place, the Hokage would not be so easily brought down, he stated calmly. Not within Konoha. We should as well consider measures like refraining from any travel outside Konoha, at least until all this is solved. It seems a good enough measure, Tsunade said, and all the others immediately nodded in agreement. Whoa, Naruto protested hotly. Calm down, guys. He looked around the serious faces. If you're hinting that I should miss the Chunin exams, Neji, Ba-chan, I say no way. I refuse to be scared into hiding by some petty terrorists. Naruto, it's just a question of being careful, at least until this is solved. Sakura interjected, her voice worried. Shikamaru as well looked disapprovingly at the Naruto. You're too troublesome, Naruto, he said in exasperation. We should take this seriously. Why take unnecessary risks? The most reasonable thing would be to keep a low profile for the time being. I am taking this seriously, said Naruto sharply. Just don't treat me like a weapon to be hidden, again. Everyone in the room knew he was making allusion to the war, when he had been kept in secret. He had been furious when he had discovered what had been going on, and he still retained a tiny grudge for being kept away in the dark while all his precious people had been fighting to death. Everyone shifted uncomfortably in their seats, not having any comment to that. And anyway, this is all based on assumptions, and the Chunin exams are still months away, let's not jump the guns, should we? He continued, in a more subdued tone. He turned towards Sai, try to get more clues on this new info. We will follow this closely, he said with a tone of finality. Kakashi gave a long sigh. He refrained from saying anything for the time being, knowing his former student, he knew that it would be pointless to try to convince him otherwise if he had put something in his head. Sakura looked sideways at Sasuke, who was sitting next to her, a worried frown etched on her face. He sighed. What else did you expect? He told her in an undertone as he caught her look. I hope all this gets sorted out soon enough, said Sakura quietly. XOXOXO. Okay. We've fed you, now spill out. Sakura demanded, green eyes wicked as she watched the girl. Temari inspected the group of faces looking at her expectantly. Hey, that's cheating, she grumbled. A day after the arrival of the Suna delegation, the girls, as in Sakura, Tenten, Ino and Hinata, had arranged for a lunch meeting with the Suna Kunoichi, while the Kazekage and the Hokage were tied in long meetings for the day, and Kankuro having gone to visit their training grounds with Shikamaru and some others. The girls, having formed a tight friendship with the Suna Kunoichi during the war, had spent a great time and caught up with the last news. Now, with lunch over and all of them sipping a drink, relaxed, Temari found herself being at the center of attention. We'd like to know what goes on with you and that teammate of mine, Ino said with an air of information gathering by torture. And since he says nada, we figured that you would fill us in. So, out with it. At least the food was great, sighed Temari, bashfully ignoring the questions. And, Ino rasped impatiently, if you think I'm going to talk about Shika at all, you girls would wait for a very long time. Shika. Huh. Sakura immediately pounced. while Ten smirked. Come on, at least give us something, wailed Ino. Tamari smiled deviously. Well, he is good, she said in a suggestive tone, twirling her drink nonchalantly, then waited for the explosion. She was not disappointed. Kya, Ino screeched as the implication sunk in, while Hinata blushed to a crimson red. Sakura gaped speechless at the blonde Suna Kunoichi, and Ten was grinning. Hey, I've given you something, Tamari said dryly. You don't need to be such prudes now. Are Shikamaru? Wondered Sakura. Geez, our boys are definitely growing up, she groaned, shaking her head. You make a great couple, said Hinata, smiling shyly. Even though Shikamaru-kun tries to hide it, you can see how much he admires you. Ino held a sour expression. Oh, the sneaky one, she muttered, feeling deflated that she, as his teammate, had not known anything at all about him dating Tamari. She thought they were close enough that he would share something as important as that. Hey, whatever there is between us, it's still shaky, Tamari said, suddenly serious. We both don't know where this will go, we don't even know whether it will last up till the next time we meet, which you know is very rare. That's why we prefer not to say anything. She looked at Ino. It's not like he wants to hide things from his teammate. Ino grudgingly nodded. She could understand that. Well, you guys better give us a decent amount of notice for the wedding, she grumbled. Tamari only rolled her eyes at this. Marriage is the last thing on our minds for the time being, she assured. We are still struggling to get a decent schedule of us seeing each other. The girls nodded in commiseration. Talking about marriage, have you heard that the daimyo is expected in Konoha with his daughter next week? Ten asked. Yes. So, replied Ino. Well, it's being whispered that it could be about a marriage proposal for the Hokage. Sakura chalked on her drink. Marriage proposal for Naruto, she spluttered. Tamari looked at Sakura with keen interest. What's so surprising about it? She said. As a single, young and hot Hokage, he's bound to attract marriage proposals from all over the nation. We have been plagued by gazillions of proposals for Gaara since he'd been Kazekage. Oh, a mysterious, heated discomfort gripped Sakura. She stole a glance towards Hinata. Apart from a slight blush, the Hyuga girl appeared collected. Well, I'm sure the whisperings are just speculations and gossips, she said firmly. Naruto would have said something about it otherwise. I really doubt that he would know about it yet, remarked Ten, knowing how clueless he usually is about these things. Hinata chuckled softly. Yes, that's Naruto-kun, all right. Sakura was quiet while the others continue with their chatter. She felt unsettled by the conflicting emotions running through her. As his best friend, she should have been ecstatic that Naruto was receiving such high-class marriage proposals. She had been prepared that such a day will arrive that he would have a girlfriend, a fiancé or a wife, and she had made the resolve to be happy for him when such a day would come. So, the clench in her stomach at the news took her by surprise. Furthermore, there was Hinata. She looked at the beautiful Hyuga again. She had grown out of her shy stuttering, and turned into an even more stunningly beautiful young woman. If there was someone who had been highest on the list of deserving Naruto, it had been Hinata. The girl was perfect in every sense, she had always loved Naruto, and had never ever been nasty to him. Sakura had never asked Naruto about his feelings for Hinata. It was subject she had difficulty in approaching, and felt that it was up to Naruto to discuss it with her if he wanted to. But she had been sort of expecting that something would build up between the two. Now, out from nowhere, a daimyo's daughter was just about to enter in the picture. Catching Ino's eyes on her, Sakura hastily forced a smile and dragged her attention back to the conversation. XOXOX. It was wonderful having them, Naruto said, feeling a bit sad as he watched the Suna group disappearing from view, some days later. Sakura and Ino nodded, while Shikamaru remained silent. The small group had come to the main gates to see the Suna delegation off. Sakura stole a glance at Shikamaru. Though he kept his face as neutral as possible, She could detect the hint of bleakness in his eyes as he continued to look out towards the already disappeared group. But we will see them soon, she said cheerfully to no one in particular, aiming to rise the mood of their silently brooding friend. Yeah, Ino piped in, catching her intention. The Chunin exams are only 2 months away. We will meet them again in no time at all. And what with the new trade agreements that had been settled, Sakura continued, we should expect to see them very often now. I'm looking forward to go to Suna for the Chunin exams, agreed Naruto, oblivious to what the two girls were up to. He did not miss Sakura's immediate worried frown as he said that. I'm sure things will be fine by then, he told her firmly. Now, I'm getting hungry. Let's go and have some ramen. Sakura sighed. It was no use debating the issue with him right now, they would have to see how things proceed in the coming months. Always hungry, she grumbled, then turned towards Shikamaru. It's a good idea, though. I still have some time left for my lunch hour. Shizune will take care of things. Let's go. Shikamaru shook his head. I'll decline underscore. He started, but immediately Sakura and Ino pulled him each by an arm. You can postpone your sky gazing for another time, Ino said firmly. Chuzi would be joining us as well. Hey, I was not going to sky gaze. Shikamaru protested, affronted. He had given up on that hobby long ago. Well, he only did it very rarely, but he was not about to admit that. It would spoil the image of the serious, responsible man that he held. Both girls ignored him. Whatever it is, it can wait, said Sakura, and both girls dragged the protesting young man towards Ichiraku. They had no intention of leaving their obviously blue friend to mope alone. Shikamaru looked at Naruto helplessly. Naruto only shrugged. If Sakura-chan says you need ramen, it means you need ramen. I should have known you would side with her. Grumbled Shikamaru. And you girls are too troublesome, he groaned, giving up on resisting. Naruto followed them, grinning, Sasuke by his side. Naruto tried not to fidget as he sat facing the daimyo after about an hour of meeting. His attention had since long been waned, as it was always the case when he was bored. It was something which he, unfortunately, had not outgrown, his short attention span when he was subjected to lengthy, boring lectures and talks. Thus, it was with much effort that he spoke all the necessary words when appropriate and expected of him, in a polite and interested manner that was befitting with a meeting with the daimyo, while inside he was dying for this useless and lengthy meeting to be over. Naruto had been informed about the visit of the daimyo since a week, but he did not understand why he had been called for a meeting as soon as the daimyo had set foot in Konoha. Usually, when the daimyo came to Konoha, which had been only a couple of times since Naruto had taken the title of Hokage, a full council meeting with all the clan leaders was called. And due to the exact arrival time of the daimyo being usually unknown, the meeting would have been scheduled at least one day after his arrival. But this time, the daimyo had only asked for the Hokage's presence, which had also puzzled Naruto, seeing that there was nothing major or urgent to discuss. Naruto had immediately called for Tsunade. No way was he going to face the daimyo without her. She was his safeguard, to keep him in line from doing any mishap. Now, Naruto sat, with the afternoon being almost over, listening to the useless conversation and idle chat for the past hour. The burly, regally dressed man did not seem to be in a hurry at all. He had chatted about mundane subjects ranging from politics which did not really concern Konoha, to the weather of the past year or so. The young Hokage had to curb the desire to yawn or say anything to end this meeting, but the memory of Tsunade's warning, back when he took seat of Hokage came to his mind. She had severely droned into him that under no circumstances, ever, was he to show disrespect to the daimyo. Our people in Konoha may look fondly to your impulsiveness and your habit of freely speaking up your mind, she had told him. They love you, and they know your worth and are indulgent to your ways. But don't ever show such easy attitude or any type of disrespect to the daimyo. He is the ruler of the fire country, don't ever forget that. Even if it kills you, control your impulsiveness. Think 100 times before opening your mouth. So, Naruto tried hard not to give in to his impulsiveness. It was one of the downside of being Hokage, he had learnt to be almost at the whims and beck of the daimyo. If the daimyo wanted a meeting just for idle chats, Naruto could not refuse him. If he, as Hokage, had jurisdiction over Konoha, the daimyo had jurisdiction over him, the Hokage. It was a fact Naruto willingly accepted, and he felt it his utmost duty, as Hokage, to ensure that the daimyo is satisfied with Konoha. However, boring and lengthy excuse of a meeting such this one was not his cup of tea. He still wondered why the hell he had been called. He snapped to attention as another person, a young girl, joined them. Please let me introduce you to my daughter, Kion, the daimyo said in his high-pitched voice, waving his heavily ring-fingered hand towards the girl. Naruto looked at her. She looked to be anything from 16 to 20, difficult to say beneath the bulky silk kimono and heavy makeup. She was not bad looking, thought Naruto as he watched her. At least she has nothing from her heavy set, tripled chin, placid-looking father, though the nobility blood was clear at the high, almost disdainful set of her chin as she greeted them. Her eyes were sharp and appraising as she gave a regal bow towards Naruto, then turned towards Tsunade and greeted her in turn. As we will be in Konoha for the next 2 days, I would like Kion to see around the village and learn all that there needs to learn about a shinobi village, the daimyo said. And I ask you, the Hokage, to please be her escort for this. This properly jerked Naruto from his drowsy state. He stared at the daimyo, thinking maybe he had heard wrong. You are the only one fitted to escort my daughter around, said the man, while with a flourish, opened his fabric fan and fluttered it over his face. Naruto was about to splutter with indignation. Surely the daimyo realized that as Hokage, he had much more important things to do than playing the guide to his daughter, when he felt a discreet nudge at his sides. He stole a glance at Tsunade, who was seated by his side. She gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. Don't ever show disrespect to the daimyo. Her warning came back to him. He swallowed his words, and had no choice but to nod at the daimyo. Of course, daimyo-sama, he murmured. I'll reschedule all my work and move all my appointments to the afternoon. Oh, I'm so looking forward to see how ninjas live, chimed in the girl, speaking for the first time. Father has told me so many things about Konoha. I've been eager to come to visit. It's our pleasure, Kion-san, said Naruto politely. So, that's settled then, the daimyo exclaimed, beaming at Naruto. Tsunade looked at the daimyo's smugly satisfied expression. So the rumors had been true, she thought. The daimyo did have something in his mind. Naruto, she noted with a certain relief, looked blissfully clueless, she smirked inwardly. The daimyo looked at her with a suggestive glint, waggling his eyebrows, egging her to say something in the direction his mind was, maybe, but Tsunade looked innocently back at him, pretending not to catch the barely hidden message. She had no intention of indulging the daimyo in this. True, she was the mother figure in Naruto's life, and right now, she would represent his family, but she would be damned if she was going to give her beloved son up to a noble arranged marriage. It would have been something else if Naruto had been up to it, but knowing where his heart laid, she had no intention of participating in this. For now, let the daimyo approach Naruto himself if he wanted to. They were interrupted by the sudden, silent appearance of an Anbu. Naruto recognized the mask immediately. It was one of his staff at the Hokage Tower. Usually, it would have been a diplomatic blunder to interrupt a meeting with the daimyo, but Naruto had left strict instructions to be called as soon as possible if anything cropped up in the Kumo attack case. And if the Anbu was here, it would only be due to that. My apologies, daimyo-sama, but I have to take this message. I left instructions to inform me immediately me only if it was a very urgent matter, said Naruto hurriedly. The daimyo reluctantly nodded. Naruto motioned for the Anbu to move forward. It was as Naruto as expected. Sai-san has arrived just now, and requests for a meeting, the Anbu whispered in Naruto's ears. Naruto immediately turned to the daimyo. If we have finished here, I'll have to take my leave, he said, hoping that the man was not crazy enough to retain him any further in this senseless meeting. I have a very urgent intel coming in, and we, Naruto turned towards Tsunade, will need to attend to it immediately. The daimyo did not hide his annoyance. I had hoped that you would have dinner with us, he said in an almost whiny voice. Naruto retained an irritated retort. Maybe another time, daimyo-sama, he managed to say politely. This is primordial, it concerns national security. The daimyo gave a petulant sigh. Well, don't forget to pick Kion tomorrow for her visit, he said. Will 9 o'clock a.m. be okay? Asked Naruto, looking from the daimyo to the girl. She nodded. I'll be ready, she said. Naruto bowed to the daimyo, then to his daughter, Tsunade doing the same, before they both left. That was the most useless meeting I've been subjected to, Naruto lamented as soon as he and Tsunade was out of earshot. And what the hell does he take me to be, his personal tourist guide? He exclaimed, the indignation he felt in the room exploding. Well, he is right, in a way, Tsunade said, placating. As per the protocol, being the daimyo's daughter, she has the right to the highest respect of Konoha, which is you, she told him. Naruto huffed. Tsunade did not tell him about her suspicion concerning the possible proposal the daimyo had in head. She thought it was better that he spend the next day showing Kion around not knowing about it. His usual, innocent self was the best deterrent to any possible moves. He may have grown into a heartthrob and had tons of fangirls throwing themselves at his feet, but the hectic life he had led had not given him the opportunity to spend romantic time with the opposite sex, thus he was still basically as clueless as he was as a teenager when it came to reading subtle feminine turn-ons. So, unless the girl would make some heavily suggestive moves, which Tsunade highly doubted, she would bet anything that Naruto would not recognize anything amiss, if there would be. It was a good timing from Sai. I wonder what news he brings in, said Naruto worriedly, his thoughts already on the coming meeting, as they rushed to the Hokage Tower. XOXOX. Naruto closed the report with a snap before gliding it to Tsunade. The said document was the compiled autopsy reports of the 6 Kumo shinobis, file which Sai had handed him just some minutes ago, courtesy of the Raikage. The autopsy report reiterated what Sai reported in the first meeting, not the tiniest signs of damage to the bodies, not the slightest injuries, internal or external, and no traces of poisoning. Naruto could not make out all of the complicated medical terminologies, but at a simple summary written at the bottom of the report had concluded the deaths due to whole body failure, without an explainable cause. Naruto was by no means any expert in the medic field, but even to his limited knowledge on the subject, he knew that 6 young men, aging from 21 to 27 years, as per the reports, with perfect health, cannot drop dead from body failure just like that. And what bothered him in the report was that the autopsy had revealed the deaths of the 6 shinobis to be almost simultaneous. Added to this detail was Sai's previous report, which had indicated that there had been no traces of disturbance in the surroundings where the bodies had been found to indicate that a fight had taken place. His investigations and the positions of the bodies had made Sai had ruled out the possibility that they had been killed somewhere else and transported to the discovery location. Naruto was suddenly engulfed by the unpleasant memories that such type of deaths was evoking in him. The only thing I know which could cause such types of death was the Rinnegan, the human path which Pain used, he said slowly, a dread filling him. The removal of the souls, which caused instant death but still leaving the body, and the surrounding, intact. Tsunade visibly jumped, while Sai stared at him. Could it be Ba-chan? Naruto asked softly, as Tsunade quickly went through the reports. Tsunade frowned worriedly. It does seem similar as the human path soul removing technique, she agreed. But it's impossible that someone has got the Rinnegan. Madara's body had been properly disposed of, we all saw to that. And Nagato's second eye as well was disposed as well. She looked at Naruto. No, those eyes cannot be recuperated anymore, she said firmly. Tsunade was adamant enough about this fact, so Naruto gave a sigh of relief. It was an alarming idea about an unknown foe out there using the Rinnegan. But even more alarming was about another jutsu as easily destructive. There was a knock at the door, and Sakura came in. Sorry I'm late, she apologized, as she took her seat. Naruto waved her apologies off. As you see, the others are not in yet as well. I'll not be able to stay for too long, I have a surgery scheduled in 30 minutes, she said. Naruto nodded in understanding. Sakura frowned as she leafed through the reports. Same as the others, she found the autopsy reports baffling. She could not find any answers despite how much she racked her brains, working out all possible medical stratagems on what type of jutsus could cause men to fall dead like that, without causing any leaf to be upturned on the surrounding. The idea that even such a type of jutsu exists was horrifying. The idea of having perpetrator of such assignations was just simply horrifying. By the time she had finished leafing through reports, the others had slowly fled in the office. Rapidly, they were all brought up to the latest findings. Among other things, the info given by Gaara had been confirmed. Indeed, Killer Bee had supposed to be at that particular small village on that particular day, but had changed plan at the very last minute. Sai had also found out that the Raikage had shipped Killer Bee off into hiding, as a precaution. Most probably into another remote island. Knowing Killer Bee, Naruto knew that he must be very miserable by this arrangement. And the enemy does not leave any trace, said Sai. I've put my best men on this, myself personally doing some scouring the past week. But not the tiniest clue on their whereabouts. We have almost nothing to go about it. They've totally disappeared. By now, we have Suna, Kumo and ourselves actively on the lookout, so it is not surprising that they would keep a low profile, said Kakashi. Sai nodded. Yes, they must be aware that they are being looked after. We haven't heard anything unusual again since. The discussion continued for a longer while, but no one had any new ideas to put in. Sakura stood up. I'll have to leave now, she said. The 30 minutes was over, she had to rush back to the hospital. Tsunade as well stood up. If you don't need me, Naruto, I'll go too, she said. Naruto nodded, since he had been about to adjourn the meeting anyway. After the two women left, Shikamaru and Neji made to stand up too, but Kakashi spoke, making them pause. Are you still bent on going to Suna for the Chunin exams? The older man asked Naruto. Naruto sat up a little straighter, and looked around at Kakashi. His hands tightened on his desk. Kakashi-sensei, I still maintain my previous stance. I refuse to stay confined, scared of an unknown enemy, he replied gruffly. Shikamaru settled in his seat again, Neji following suit. Your going to Suna would be like an open invitation to make you a target, remarked Shikamaru. I don't think the enemy would be so daring so as to invade shinobi villages, they'll need opportunities like the Kumo incident, in a civilian-only village. And you traveling would be exactly what the enemy is waiting for underscore. And maybe that's what would work, Naruto cut in. A sudden silence followed. Sasuke stared at him. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, right? The blue eyes looking back at Sasuke were totally serious. If we need to tackle this unknown enemy once and for all, the best, obvious way is to draw it out of its hiding, Naruto slowly said. If it's me they want, then they'll get me. We'll ambush them. Shikamaru looked at Naruto incredulously. Neji made a move to talk, but Naruto forestalled him. With someone having a jutsu as powerful and lethal out there, it would be in all our best interest, or I should say all of the 5 nations' best interest, to stop this person as quickly as possible, he said earnestly, looking around at the incredulous and skeptical faces of his team. We just came out of a war. We've worked hard to attain this peace. We've lost many in the process. Why should we cower before an unknown group who wants to destroy this peace we have worked so hard for? We should not let them grow stronger while they are in hiding. But you serving as bait is pure folly. Protested Shikamaru finally. You're really playing with fire, Sasuke agreed, frowning. And I doubt Tsunade-sama and the council, in that matter, would agree to your foolish plan. Or Sakura. He did not say it aloud, but he was sure their teammate would not be happy about such a reckless action on the part of the blonde. They don't need to be told that we are planning to lure out the enemy, Naruto argued. Kakashi shook his head. Still rushing into things blindly, he sighed. You're the Hokage, you should not think about being a bait so easily as that, Neji finally spoke. As the Hokage, you have to ensure Konoha's safety first. Not to go and give yourself up so easily. And even if you don't like it, as a Jinchuriki, you have an even greater responsibility of being ensured that some crazy, power-lusting group does not get hold of you, Kakashi added. And I doubt that you'll be able to hide such an important matter from Tsunade or the council. As I said before, treating me as a mere weapon and hiding me, as was done at the beginning of the war, is not the solution, Naruto insisted. Kakashi shifted uncomfortably. You know that was not our decision, he calmly said. The war decisions were taken by the alliance. Tsunade-sama was against this. We were outrun by the council and the alliance, that's all. But then why should I take the same path now? I won't let the council decide on my life. I have some power to decide on my own freedom, and I refuse to be hidden again. And Neji, I am not giving myself up easily. I'll have you guys watching my back. The group remained silent. Naruto sighed. He needed his team. He could not go through this without their support. Do we really want to play the waiting game? He asked around the silent men. For how long? If we are correct in our assumption, I'm one of the two only remaining Jinchuriki which this unknown person or group seems to be targeting. It's either me, or Killer Bee, the next target. Since I have the best team of the 5 nations, I say that I have the best chance to get out of this plan successfully. Shikamaru gave a long sigh. Naruto, you're too troublesome, he groaned, shaking his head in disbelief. Naruto knew that he had won over the Nara. What the use of having the best strategist around if we cannot make good use of him? He grinned. There's a limit to being irrational and reckless. Shikamaru protested, though it was quite half-hearted. Naruto looked them. Guys, don't forget we are all presuming that I'm a target for this mysterious new enemy who had attacked some Kumo shinobis weeks ago. If our presumption is correct, then we already have the upper hand on the enemy, he said. He's right, Sai slowly said. It's terribly risky, but it could work. I cannot find any other way other than grounding our Hokage to Konoha for the next decade for his safety. The Raikage has already exiled his brother to an unknown location again, I'm sure it was against the wish of Killer Bee. Kakashi sighed in defeat. He as well knew that Naruto's plan looked could work. Still, he had some qualms about doing this behind the council's back. But he has sworn allegiance to the Hokage when he had agreed to become his counselor, and he knew that Naruto was stubborn enough to see through his crazy plan, so it was better that he was by his side in this. We'd better plan this very carefully, he said finally. Naruto looked at Neji. Neji. The Hyuga gave a sigh. We better ensure that we get the upper hand on this enemy, he said. Naruto breathed in relief. He didn't need to ask Sasuke. He knew that his friend would be by his side, no matter what. XOXOX. She'll kill us both if something happens to you, remarked Sasuke later, as he, Naruto and Sai made their way to Ichiraku. The three, being at a loose end after the meeting, had decided to have dinner together, while the rest of the group had dispersed. Yeah, I know, said Naruto. There was no need to ask who Sasuke was referring to. Same as Tsunade, I don't think I'll let her know. Sasuke smirked. You're stupid if you think you'll be able to keep her out of the loop. Sai smiled. It's been a long while that he had hanged around his friends. His long, frequent missions out of Konoha made that he was mostly unavailable to socialize. It was nice to be among his friends again. I'll do it, Naruto insisted. Sasuke glared at him in exasperation. Why am I letting myself be dragged into this? Because you're bored, Naruto grinned. And because you have no choice, your place is by my side. Sasuke grumped. Ayame beamed her usual smile when the Hokage and his two friends entered the Ichiraku ramen bar. After ordering their food, the three settled down. Tomorrow I have to play guide to the daimyo's daughter, grumbled Naruto, remembering his meeting with the daimyo earlier. I felt as if I've been given a D-class mission back in our genin days, similar like when we had to catch Tora the cat. Sasuke raised his eyebrows. So that's all what the meeting with the daimyo was about? He asked. Yap. It was a total loss of time, talking about some far country's politics and the weather. Can you imagine it? He called for a meeting to talk about the weather. You must always maintain a good political relationship with the daimyo, Sai reminded him. Yeah, I know. But I didn't expect that having to play guide came along with the package, Naruto grumbled again. Surely showing such high nobility like the daimyo's daughter cannot be that bad. Sai asked. Unless she is unpleasant. He looked at Naruto expectantly. Naruto shook his head. She seems nice enough, though she hardly talked. But still, I have much more important things to use my time for, he complained. Like spending some more time with Sakura, he thought. He had barely managed to spend a decent time with her the past week. Both of them had been loaded with work. She had taken a new batch of genins at the beginning of the week, so she now had to teach on top of her medic nin duties. The very little free time she had was practically non-existent, it seemed. The couple of times he had managed to free himself to drop at the hospital, she had been taken in treating patients, and they could only have some few hurried words. She finished work so late at night that he thought it would be better not to retain her further, she obviously needed to have a decent rest. And why does she need to know about a shinobi life anyway? Continued Naruto, the day with Kion looming ahead. Sasuke looked wordlessly at him, exasperated. He had a small idea what was in the daimyo's mind, but he would be damned if he was going to be the one to tell this to Naruto. Whatever his reasons, you better do this properly, said Sai, his face serious. I have an excellent book about rules of courting a girl. I can lend it to you so that you have a quick look for tomorrow. Sasuke almost did a facepalm. Naruto spluttered in protest. Hey, I'm not courting this girl. Sai shrugged. He still held the habit of learning about ways in books, though he had come a long way from the cold, emotionless teenage boy that they had known when he first joined the Kakashi group. Still, it's better that you know, he said. Let me run some of the rules with you. And before Naruto could place another words, he went on, punctuality is primordial. Don't be late to pick her up, not even by 1 minute. Then, since this is your first time taking her out, you could take her to a tea house as a starter, it will be proper. Sigh. Naruto was practically jumping from his seat. It's just an official tour, not a courting date. I'll just take her to the main administrative buildings and maybe to some training grounds, that's all. Sai looked calmly at Naruto. But still, it's not anybody that you are taking around. You should know a bit about proper etiquettes, he insisted. Naruto rolled his eyes, at the end of his patience. I have a better idea, Sasuke drawled suddenly. Since this is an official tour anyway, why not take Sai along with you? Seeing that he seems to be very knowledgeable in such etiquettes and protocols, he will help in case you make a false step. Naruto immediately brightened. Hey, that's an excellent idea. Sai looked doubtful. Are you sure? Won't the daimyo be negative at this? Why should he? Asked Naruto. As far as I am along, he should not find any problem with it. Sai accepted to accompany Naruto. He was always eager to get to know more people, and he was quite curious to meet the daimyo's daughter, never having really socialized with such high nobility before. I'll read the book thoroughly again, he promised. And especially no nicknames, okay? Warned Naruto. The gang had worked hard on Sai to make him give up the habit of giving nicknames to people, more so those that he met for the first times. I'll be within reach, but out of your way, Sasuke informed the two. Their food arrived, and they immediately dug in. XOXOX. The next stop is at the hospital, announced Sai, as Kion emerged from the small shop in which she had been browsing while Naruto and Sai patiently waited. The day had turned out to be quite pleasant, much to Naruto's surprise. Kion had turned out to be outspoken and vivacious, unlike the nobility coldness that he had been expecting. Sai proceeded to give a short history of the hospital while they made their way towards it. He had been an invaluable help in this tour. He had given a short historic background on each of the place that they had visited, before and after war. He had not made any misplaced comment, and had been an excellent commentator. If Kion had been bored by the technical details, she did not show it, taking all opportunities to show her enthusiasm and gushing over almost everything. We can boast to have the best hospital of the 5 nations, said Sai proudly. Oh, with such a bright Hokage, it's not surprising, exclaimed Kion, smiling up at Naruto. Naruto smiled back, though awkwardly. She had been doing that all the time, praising him ceaselessly. Oh, all the merits go to our previous Hokage, Tsunade, and her 2 apprentices, Shizune and Sakura, he corrected. They are the best medic nins out there, due to which we have the best hospital. Kion fluttered her eyelashes at him. You are being too modest, she chided. Here we are, Sai cut in before Naruto could say anything further. They stood before the new, impressive building of the hospital. As soon as they entered the main entrance hall, Naruto spotted the distinctive pink hair. His face brightened, as it always did, when he saw her, the blue eyes lingering over her as she issued some instructions to a doctor. The usual commotion at the arrival of the Hokage must have alerted her. She raised her eyes to look over at them. Sakura-chan, he called out warmly, waving his hands. He quickly made his way towards her, leaving Kion with Sai. As he reached her, his eyes skimmed over her, noting the dark circles under her eyes. She had her white overcoat still on, her mask hanging over her neck, meaning that she must just have emerged from the treatment room. She nodded to the doctor, having finished with the instructions, and then turned towards Naruto. You look drained, he said immediately. Yeah, it's been a busy day, she sighed. The surgery last night had lasted much longer than anticipated. We had some complications, she said. It had dragged since very late in the night, and by the time she had wrapped things up, give the necessary instructions, she had almost fell off her feet. And I had to do the follow-up treatment early since morning, she continued. And still have tons of reports to finish, she thought. But the patient is fine now, she said, her face brightening with a triumphantly smile. That reward was worth any bone-tiring day. Naruto smiled proudly back. That's my Sakura-chan, he exclaimed. Sakura tried not to preen under his praise. What brings you here? She asked. Hokage-sama, you suddenly disappeared. Kion's complaining voice rang out, as she stepped beside Naruto. She looked at Sakura questioningly. Oh, sorry, Naruto apologized immediately. This is Haruno Sakura, our head medic nin, he introduced. And this is Kion, the daimyo's daughter, he turned to Sakura. I'm showing her around. Sakura felt a jolt. The daimyo's daughter. The conversation with the girls came back to her mind. She felt a sudden rush in her ears, and she almost missed his next words. The daimyo wishes her to know about the main thing of Konoha and the life of a shinobi, so we thought our hospital is a must in the itinerary, Naruto was saying. Sakura murmured some polite words, while discreetly examining the girl. She was stunningly beautiful. There was no doubt about that. About 17 years old, lustrous strawberry blonde hair cascading in a mass of curls down her back, gray eyes framed by unbelievably long eyelashes and finely arched eyebrow, high cheekbones, dainty nose, perfectly drawn lips, flawless skin, face artfully made up, and a dream figure with voluptuous curves at the right places. The bright blue and red traditional kimono she wore emphasized her coloring and rendered everything surrounding her colorless. In comparison, Sakura felt dowdy. She was suddenly keenly aware of her tired, bared of makeup, sweaty face, due to which, she was sure, her forehead must be shining in all its glory. Her hair, plaited on that day due to the heat, must looked a real mess with some of the untamed tendrils escaping. Her hospital white coat felt utterly lifeless, drab, more like a sack than an actual garment. Kion emitted a tinkling laugh, her voice musically toned, as she waved her hand toward Naruto. My father can only trust the Hokage to protect me, she said. Sakura managed not to raise her eyebrows at this. Catching a glimpse of the dainty, perfectly manicured hand, she instinctively hid her own rough and jagged nailed hands behind the board she held. Naruto gave a flustered smile. You have nothing to fear within Konoha, he said. You are perfectly safe here. Sakura carefully watched Naruto. They had barely had time to talk the past days, they both had been busy by their respective works. She had not had the opportunity to bring the subject about the marriage proposal rumors up. He looked normal enough, a little pumped by the obvious flattering, maybe. She could not tell whether the proposal topic had been approached yet. Sai, who had stayed behind chatting with one of the nurse, suddenly appeared, breaking her thread of thoughts. Hi, ugh_. The immediate death glare he received from those green eyes stopped him on time. There was a time where he would not have had any clue and would have carried on, but Sai was a much emotionally wiser man than what he was when he freshly met Kakashi team. Hi Sakura, he quickly corrected. I'm accompanying them, he said, smiling, pointing towards Naruto and Kion. Oh. Sakura felt a ridiculous relief at that, though she stubbornly refused to acknowledge it as relief. I was wondering whether you could give us have a tour of the hospital, asked Naruto. I'm sorry, but I'm really taken up right now, Sakura replied, though she was not sorry at all. I'll ask Yuki to do it, if you don't mind. Naruto's face fell in disappointment, but he smiled understandingly. Of course, you do look quite busy, he said. Some minutes later, upon the convoke of Sakura, Yuki hurried towards them. Hokage-sama, Kion-sama, this way please, she ushered them along. Sakura watched them go, a tight knot in stomach. Don't worry, ugly, I'm being a good chaperone. Sakura jerked around to find Sai's eyes closing with a large smile. Why should I be worried? She spluttered. She felt a heat creeping up her face. Sai looked at her interestingly. You are blushing. It says in my book that one of the reasons a girl blush is out of shyness or embarrassment. So, if you are embarrassed, it means that my statement is true. You are indeed worried_. Sakura came out of her befuddlement fast. Didn't your book say anything about being red in anger? She growled menacingly, tightening her fist. Sai immediately backed away. He had no wish to taste her punch. See you, he called out as he quickly scampered off. XOXOX. Kion was currently laughing at something Naruto has said, her voice tinkling enthusiastically and breathlessly, perfectly manicured nails daintily gripping the Hokage's navy, traditional kimono's sleeves which he had donned for the evening, battling her long eyelashes up at him. She looked divine in a green richly embroidered, brocaded silk traditional kimono, her hair and face artfully made up. It was 2 days after the daimyo had arrived in Konoha. Earlier that afternoon, Naruto had come to the hospital to invite Sakura to the dinner party he was throwing in the honor of the daimyo's visit in Konoha. It will be a good informal way to introduce our people to the daimyo, he had explained. At the same time, it will double for a celebration dinner for the new Konoha, finally rebuilt. He had invited most of the tops of the Konoha shinobi, and of course, all his closest friends. Don't you think the daimyo would have preferred to have this dinner with only you? Sakura had asked guardedly. She was sure the daimyo wanted to have a private dinner with Naruto. She had not wanted to elaborate further, since they had been standing in the crowded hall, which was certainly not the place to discuss about any supposed marriage proposals. He had waved her doubts away. I want it this way. I have no fancy to dine alone with the daimyo, he had said confidentially. He had managed to avoid dinner with the daimyo's family the previous night, taking the excuse of having pushed all his work to the evening to be able to accompany Kion. But he could not put it off for 2 evenings in a row, and the daimyo was to leave the next day, and had been insisting for a social evening. So, Naruto had come with the bright idea of the dinner party. Besides, it's an excuse to gather the friends together, he insisted. So, here Sakura was, in a large party hall of the best restaurant in Konoha. Wearing a red, floor-length, sleeveless, Chinese-style kimono which Ino had insisted she buy when the blonde had dragged her into an impromptu shopping spree as soon as they had received the dinner invitation, her pink hair made up in a loose bun held by some sanbons at the top of her head, sipping on a chilled, fruit juice which she could not in the life of her tell what it tasted like, while she watched their Hokage being flirted on. And what an obvious flirting it was. There has been a big jump from yesterday to today, thought Sakura as she watched the familiarity with which the girl was holding Naruto's arm, the almost suggestive way she was looking at him. She wondered, with a sudden shakiness, whether the proposal had already been put forward. If it was the case, Naruto did not seem negative about it. The 40 guests or so were standing around, chatting and sipping some drinks, while waiting for dinner to be announced. The clan leaders were present, as were the captains, the most eminent junins and the whole gang of their friends. Each of the shinobi present had been introduced, in turn, to the daimyo, who sat at the head of the room, his wife at his side, while Naruto sat with Kion by his side. Hokage-sama, you are so funny. The young girl squealed for the umpteenth time, leaning towards the blonde, her voice carrying to where Sakura was. Sakura unconsciously gritted her teeth. She could almost see stars shining in the young girl's eyes, who had been hanging all over Naruto the whole time. Wasn't nobility supposed to be more contained, more regal? Sakura thought cattily, though carefully avoiding to ponder on her being so riled up at the girl's heavy, oh so obvious hitting on the Hokage. And it was another matter that their Hokage did not seem to be minding the attention at all, a large smile plastered on his face. Why should he, anyway? Sakura thought darkly. Which man would not be enticed by such a beautiful, and obviously interested girl? She tried not to look in their direction, which was proving to be difficult, what with the tinkle voice ringing out each second and the bright green kimono standing out among the guests. And Naruto never went unnoticed, anyway, as usual. Put him among hundreds, he would still stand out, he always had that strange power. Sakura resolutely turned her back on the couple, looking instead at the silent man sipping his drink beside her. Please tell me that I wasn't that bad, she groaned in a low voice, as another peal of girlish laughter rang out. She needed to say something, otherwise she felt like she would explode. As response, she got a smirk, meaning yes, she had been as girlishly starstruck as the girl. She felt like banging her head against a wall in mortification. At least you had a valid excuse, Sasuke drawled. She raised her eyebrows almost apprehensively at this, waiting in silence for the Uchiha to elaborate. You were 12 years. A tiny hint of amusement could be seen in the black eyes. A heavy sigh escaped her. I really should apologize for all the trouble I was back then. We were all kids, he shrugged. She sure is not a kid, she said waspishly, looking towards Kion, forgetting her resolution to not look towards the couple. Those voluptuous curves were anything but kid-like. Sasuke looked at her, eyes narrowed. What? She almost snapped, unnerved by the thorough scrutiny. Your reaction to her is interesting, he drawled, the black eyes calculating. She sent him a death glare. She had enough self-analysis to do, and having him cross-analyzing her reactions was the last thing she needed. Uchiha, if you want me to forget that you tried to ram a weapon in me twice, you'd better drop the direction your thought is taking. He grunted. A few minutes later, Ino joined them, followed by Ten-Ten and Hinata. Greeting the girls, and murmuring an excuse, Sasuke quickly eclipsed away. Still uncomfortable around girls, isn't he? Ten-Ten remarked. Sakura smiled ruefully. He has never been a social butterfly, she chuckled. She could see Choji talking with Lee, Sai, Neji and Shikamaru in a corner. So, managed to let go of the fiancé of yours finally, haven't you? She teased Ino. Well, I had to clearly stake my claim on him, Ino replied snarkily. What with such a femme fatale around? She is quite something, isn't she? Ten whispered, looking across the room as yet another laugh from Kion tinkled out. Yes, she is very beautiful, agreed Hinata quietly. Sakura looked at the Hyuga girl, who looked stunning in a floor-length lilac dress, her lustrous black hair shining down her back, the perfect, white skin enhanced by the hue of her dress. She could only marveled at how calm and collected Hinata looked, every inch a classy, beautiful and poised princess that she was, kindness and gentleness oozing out of her. Hinata, you are even more beautiful. She whispered almost vehemently. Hinata looked at her in surprise, while a faint blush crept up her cheeks. Thank you, Sakura, she murmured, smiling shyly. You look beautiful too. Her eyes held a knowing expression which Sakura could not understand, but before she could ponder on it, Tsunade came to join their group. Quite a party, huh? The former Godime smiled cheerfully, a glass of sake in hand. The others nodded. We managed to get the daimyo to contribute to it, she said, with a devious smile. Sakura shook her head. She'd better not ask how her shisho had done that. What do you think of the girl? Tsunade asked Sakura abruptly, in a low voice that the others could not hear. Huh, the girl, stuttered Sakura, taken by surprise. Tsunade pointed her chin towards Kion. The daimyo's girl, she said, watching Sakura closely. Why this question? Sakura thought. She's okay, she forced out after a pause. What else could she say? Tsunade looked satisfied. Before Sakura could query why the question, the older woman had waved cheerily and moved off to another group, leaving Sakura perplexed. A while later, Sakura strolled out on the terrace which gave on the back garden. She leant forward against the wooden rail. The warm summer air, sweetened by the scent of fruits, tantalized her nose as she took a deep breath. The slight cooling breeze fluttering on her face was soothing and she felt some of her tension smoothing away. Dinner was over about half an hour ago, but the party was still going on, people still chatting and enjoying each other's company. It's been a long time they have such a gathering. And Kion was still flirting heavily with their Hokage. No announcements had been made, though, as per the speculations which Sakura's wild imagination had been conjuring up. A troubled frown marred her face as Sakura managed to get a grip on her raging emotions and tried to rationally evaluate her own reactions at the sight of the young noble lavishing her attention on Naruto. She did not like that she was feeling so geared up like that, she felt so weak. She has been on edge since the previous day when Naruto had come to the hospital with Kion. Her night had been lousy, tossing about in her bed, sleep eluding her until the wee morning hour, her imagination running wildly ahead of her. No, if she was honest with herself, weak could not even describe how she felt. She felt like smashing some walls, taking down some buildings, digging out some craters, and scratching out some gray eyes. There, she had admitted it. She was feeling very bothered at the sight of Kion being with Naruto, holding his arms and draping herself over him all the time. What she felt when she saw the girl hanging all over Naruto made the rivalry which she used to have with Ino seem tame. Grr. She gave a tortured, exasperated huff. She was very unhappy about what she was feeling. It was as if she was retrograding again to the emotionally directed girl that she had promised she would never be again. All the emotional defenses that she had so painfully and carefully built were slowly crumbling around her, and she was scared. Would she feel that way at every girl who would give Naruto some attention? God knows he really deserved any loving attention he gets. And where the hell would this feeling of rage, she refused to call it by any other name, lead her, anyway? She and Naruto, how can it ever be? And where did Hinata fit in all this? She asked herself again. Here you are, I was wondering where you've disappeared to. Sakura jumped and wheeled around, as the one of her thoughts walked through the large sliding doors. Naruto bore a wide grin as he moved beside her, leaning forward and cropping both his elbows on the rim of the balustrade. She looked at him. He looked cut in the traditional kimono, the draped garment suggesting rather than showing his powerful physique, the navy color making his eyes appearing darker, more mysterious. More predatory. She swallowed. What's wrong with Hinata? She blurted, a little more belligerently than she intended. Huh? What's wrong with Hinata? Eyebrows slammed in a frown, he immediately straightened himself and looked with urgent concern towards the inside of hall, where Hinata had been earlier. No. Nothing has happened to her, she said hastily, and he turned back to look at her, puzzled. I meant, if you are so bent on marrying into nobility, why don't you choose Hinata? His eyes widened in surprise. Before he could say anything, she hurried on, she has always loved you, from far back when all of us used to look down on you. She has always treated you right. She's very beautiful, kind, sweet, strong, perfect, and she did not think 1 minute about sacrificing herself for you during the pain fight, so, why? Sakura felt she was trespassing onto dangerous territory, but she could not stop herself. She had never dared ask him the question. But they were best friends, surely she could ask. And she wanted to know. Remorse was apparent on his face as he looked down at his feet. After a silence during which Sakura quivered in uncertainty, feeling that she had indeed crossed a boundary, he looked up at her, eyes guarded. I don't lie to myself, Sakura, he said softly, face serious. Her breath hitched silently. Those words, they evoked some painful memories. Hinata, I'm really very honored that a girl like Hinata has such feelings for me, he said in a low voice. And I truly regret that I can't give her what she wants. Sakura watched him, unable to say anything. I'm not in love with her, he continued. I have high respect for her, for the person she is, but I don't love her that way. It would be unfair to both of us if I get with her, feeling the way I do. It would be out of obligation, and she deserves much better than that. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, not knowing what to say. She was hurt when I told her years ago, but she understood and accepted my decision, he said. Sakura was surprised. She had never known that he had such a talk with Hinata. A heavy silence descended between them. She did not know what to make of all this, and she dared not probe deeper. She suddenly felt vulnerable, her stomach churning. Not liking the feeling, she went into her defensive mode, and glared at him. So, are you trying to say that you are in love with her? She almost snapped, pointing her chin towards the Kion. The heavy atmosphere immediately dissipated at her waspish tone. He looked flabbergasted. Huh, where does that come from? You seem to be positive about the proposal. She could not prevent the accusing tone of her voice. Quote, exclamation mark. Which proposal? He looked genuinely mystified. She suddenly felt some misgivings. Maybe the proposal had not been put forward yet. He looked questioningly at her, expecting a reply. She shuffled uncomfortably, suddenly feeling very stupid about her outburst. Why the hell didn't I hold my tongue? She thought desperately, regretting her lack of control. The silence stretched, as he continued to watch her expectantly. Aware that she should say something, she took a deep breath. They were best friends, damn it, she should be able to discuss such things surely, as friends, was her brave thoughts as she started, quite subdued. Well, there's this info, she halted. Info. She glared at him for the interruption. Well, there was the word circulating around, that the daimyo wants to propose his daughter's hand to you. Ah, she frowned. That's it. She would have expected a more surprised reaction, had he been totally ignorant of the supposed proposal. She became aware of the teasing glint in his eyes, and she immediately bristled. And seeing the way you were fawning all over her underscore. Was I really? Underscore, it's natural to assume that you are seriously considering underscore. Don't you know it's dangerous to assume, Sakura-chan? The blue eyes were practically dancing with laughter now. Underscore the proposal. She finished, a vein tickling on her forehead by then, and her eyes flashed angrily at him. He watched her, a small smile tugging the corners of his mouth, merry eyes boring straight into her. Suddenly, he scrunched his eyes, bent his head forward and peered closely at her face, still not saying anything. She hurriedly took a step back, her eyebrows shooting up. A large, satisfied grin broke out on his face. I'd say that you are jealous, Sakura-chan. He finally said. What? She sputtered, her eyes widening. He nodded his head solemnly. Yes, you are. Her jaw was practically hanging down. I'm not. Then why are you blushing? Because your statement is outrageous. Is it? If so, why haven't you punched the daylights out of me yet? She looked at him incredulously. You want to be punched? Well, if I was so off target, I would have been punched halfway through Konoha by now. Since when has he gotten that smart? She thought, agitated. I can't punch you here, she growled. Why is that? He asked curiously, taking a step towards her, head cocked to one side as he interestedly waited for her reply. She took another step back, only to find that her back was already pressed against the rail. His proximity and low, suave voice were doing strange things to her, like turning her feet into jelly. You know why. Because you're the Hokage. To her horror, her voice came out squeaky-ish. Oh, and that would stop you. We're in public. The daimyo. She desperately tried to formulate coherent phrases, as she looked, mesmerized, at the blue eyes, finding it unable to tear her eyes away. He did not reply, instead, watched her intently. The noise around them suddenly zoomed off. Her heart rate speeded up, her breath shaky. She swallowed nervously, and his eyes moved to her throat, seeming equally entranced. Naruto-kun. They both jumped at the voice. Shizune smiled, clueless, at both, not noticing the charged atmosphere. Sakura dazedly surfaced from her stupor, blood rushing into her face. Tsunade-sama is looking for you, the black-haired woman told Naruto. Naruto took a step back, scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously. His cheeks were ablaze, too. Okay, I'll go and see her, he said, and with a nod at both of them, he left. What the hell was that all about? Sakura thought, still shaky.